OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, a very good morning to you, very welcome along. It is Tuesday morning here on OTB AM. It's 7:30 and we're here with you all the way through until 10. How was everybody's bank holiday weekend? Shane.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good morning. Sorry, yeah. I know what you're going to say.
Well, it was Christmas for you because it was the snooker.
Yeah.
But then it got ruined.
It was a good and bad weekend for me.
Ruined.
I was at the Monaghan Derry match, man. Saturday afternoon. The game wasn't televised.
Stick dead in your performance rankings, what?
I know. Thankfully, enough happened for us to be able to avoid it. But it would have been Derry in the green, I think. Rather than
absolutely Derry in the green. Derry are genuine All-Ireland contenders, and we need to bump them up the power rankings.
But the way it worked, ironically, and the drawing is this morning, I think, for the provincial round robin. Whatever.
Noon, I think.
Noon, okay. Whatever we're calling it, and whatever. Monaghan, in my estimations, were better losing that game against Derry than beating Derry and losing an Ulster final against Armagh.
Because of the short turnaround.
Well, that, and also they stay third seeds. And because they're third seeds, Monaghan, they avoid Tyrone, Mayo and Roscommon. So they can't possibly be drawn in a group with either of those three. Whereas if they were a second seed, lose the Ulster final, they could have had been in a group with any of those, as well as a Dublin or a Kerry. So
now they also have a chance of getting Louth and Sligo.
Yeah, exactly. I think for a lot of
Clare.
teams,
They fancied a chance against Clare. Clare would fancy a chance against them.
Yeah, exactly. One of those games, but home, away and neutral. I also think the draw probably shouldn't have been now. It should have waited until all of the pairs were decided and there was a little bit of jeopardy in it. I think Lee Keegan was making that point at the weekend as well.
I don't really understand that. What's the point?
So essentially, and I'm just going to bring up the point here in front of me because I know a lot of people were kind of making this idea. So the draw takes place today, but because it's before the provincial finals, some of the provincial finals. So, for example, if the Leinster runner-up gets a much easier draw than the Leinster winner, wouldn't it make sense for Dublin to
throw the game
against Louth, essentially? Because they would favour, probably, you'd imagine, a team like Dublin an easier route to Sam than a Leinster title.
I don't think
No, I'm not saying they would, but I'm just saying that's definitely something worth considering. Is it at the final stage? No one's going to throw games, and I don't think Dublin are training for the Leinster Championship. I think they're training for the All-Ireland Round Robin series. Yeah, I just think it's a bit strange, like knowing the pairings before the provincial finals. If they could wait, why not wait?
Well, everybody else needs to make their plans. You've got to book hotels at provincial grounds. They've got to make sure that they have policing in place for the neutral venues.
Yeah, Dublin's neutral venue, of course, which will be Croke Park.
Are we guaranteed it's going to be Croke Park?
Yeah, apparently so. Home and neutral for Dublin is Croke Park.
Isn't that bullshit?
Oh, 100%.
Isn't it? And I think to Glenn Ryan's point, he says he was speaking for the whole country. I think in fairness he probably was, but we've forgotten about this because it was the Super 8. It's been so long since the Super 8s where who was it? It was Declan Boner came out and was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
they get 2 games at Croke Park.
That was 2018. I think 5 years they've had to address this.
No interest in fixing this.
No.
Kieran Whelan even acknowledged that on RTE over the weekend. They actually played Glenn Ryan's interview, went straight to Kieran. What you think? It's like, yeah, can't argue with that.
Fair enough.
It's a big problem, like.
Yeah, but Glenn Ryan's part was more so even the decisions, not just the fact that the dressing room is probably favoured for the Dubs and they get all the.
Well, it's a home game. It's a home game. The whole thing about home advantage is that there is a distinct advantage to playing at home, that is like in all sports, and is codified, and we all know what it is. And it's sleeping in your own bed. It's the decisions that the referee gets because you have a bigger crowd. It's familiarity with the ins and outs. It's the home dressing room. It's like a million different things, but it all adds up to about a 2.5-3 point swing in all sports ever in the history of the game. And so it should have been a neutral venue. It would easily have been. I don't really understand why the Dubs aren't pushing for this in a way. Like it would be to their advantage to be seen to be whiter than white on this, because then everybody equates this with the funding argument, and I personally think they're different arguments, and we should be having them all separately. But I don't know. I think that if it is actually confirmed that Dublin are going to have 2 games at home in the round robin series, then that's bullshit.
And that seems to be the suggestion. There's no talk that the neutral game is going to be anywhere other than Croke Park.
I think that there is an opportunity for them to fix that.
Yeah.
And until it's all written down and it comes out.
And that topic should even be in the Gillette Labs performance rankings, but it's not. These feel like they're getting increasingly competitive with each passing week. The three of us were tied by our own crowd.
Sure, Snooker should be in as well. But
where Spurs? Yeah. Howell Spurs. Waterford, Davies Waterford, last minute omission. But people will see, I'm sure, when they see our final 5 choices. Very hard to argue.
Yeah. Before we get to that, here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. Performance rankings are imminent. James Tracy is going to join us in studio to reflect on an absolutely amazing game against Toulouse on, it feels like it was months ago, but it was only Saturday. Vinny Perth at 8:20. Fergal O'Brien at 8:50. Sarah Donovan talking about the hurling, and we've got the Sunday paper review at 9:30. We'll do football properly on the show tomorrow. There was a lot to get our teeth stuck into.
Yeah, we will. Anthony Moyles will be on. There you go.
We need the power rankings though. Need to fix some things in the power rankings.
Let's do it tomorrow, actually.
Here for time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performance was just lacked that intensity.
Boom.
We're starting the red, lads, and a story that started to break overnight. I think we're starting with the women's rugby, and unfortunately for the women's rugby team and the Six Nations campaign, which is now finished, they've appeared quite consistently in the red for us. And the breaking news overnight, and it's a story that's been covered in the Irish Independent this morning from Brendan Fanning and Rory O'Connor, is that the Irish women's head coach Greg McWilliams is to step down from the job with immediate effect. We understand it's going to happen very soon indeed. So they lost to Scotland, of course, the weekend in their final game. It was the wooden spoon decider, and the wooden spoon it is for Ireland and for Greg McWilliams. A worst ever concession of points as well in this campaign, a minus 167. It also means Ireland are going to be in tier 3 of the new International Women's 15 competition, which starts in the autumn. So I think it's fair to say, lads, it's been a fairly #grim campaign.
Yeah, first wooden spoon since 2004 as well. And in the futures with John McKee, Niamh Briggs and Dennis Fogarty are still all up for grabs too, McWilliams' coaching staff. But it's been an unmitigated disaster really from start to finish. Like, there wasn't high hopes going into this tournament. We previewed it. We weren't feeling too confident. But, you know, like, to be nilled by England, I know England are a fantastic side, way, way ahead, but it was just so demoralising. And then to be unchanged against Scotland and actually doing well against them. Like, we were 3-0 up. It was the only time we had led all tournament long. It looks like we were going into the break 3-0 ahead, like into the red in the first half injury time. Scotland go over. And then Nicola Friday scores a well worth try in the second half. We're level at 10-all after 55 minutes. This is very promising. 25 minutes ago we could actually win this, but then Scotland just accelerated beyond us very, very quickly, retook the lead. And you know, like, there was kind of individual brilliance too at stages by Scotland, which we just don't have. Like, and you look, it's very clearly unfair and unrealistic to compare the men's and women's game in the moment in the country, but we are literally on the complete opposite end of the scale. And like, it was 2013 we won the Grand Slam. How can we get back there? Maybe this is the first step to it with the news that's breaking this morning.
So when you say expectations weren't that high, I remember we previewed the Women's Six Nations the day or two before it began, and the expectation from Greg McWilliams and the coaching team was high. They were
naturally,
we want to finish third. In fact, we feel like we can definitely finish third, behind England and France, of course, who are on another level, not least with funding. But so clearly they felt even before the tournament started that they were further along on the road than they were. Now we know that a lot of the players from the sevens weren't there, and there was a lot of relative inexperience and lack of caps in that Irish squad compared to some of the other teams, but still the coaching team and the team itself felt like third was realistic. But clearly when you look at the games that they've played over the last number of weeks, third was a pipe dream.
I understand why the coaching staff would, and the players would, of course. Like, you're going to expect the best from yourself and you want to overachieve if anything, but like, we weren't too excited about it going into it ourselves, like looking ahead from the outside. But I don't know. I don't know about you, but I didn't expect it to be this bad.
Yeah, it's an indictment of the IRFU. We've made this point from the very start, and there's always a backlash in the comments from people like, oh, you got to blame the players for this, but actually you don't. At this point, this rests squarely at the door of the chief executive of the IRFU, Kevin Potts, who's been with the IRFU for a long period of time, and so, you know, has responsibility for this. So too does David Nucifora, who's in charge of rugby. And the fact that they're pointing to new appointments over the last 12 months to try and rectify this, like, they've both been in situ for a long period of time in the IRFU, and except that Kevin Potts is newly appointed to the chief executive role, but he has been within the organisation for a long time. So, where's their track record that shows us that they're actually going to be able to fix this? Where's the evidence that their concerns about the women's game are showing results? They'll have to come out and speak publicly and show leadership on this, because you take this with the letter that was published, you take this with all of the stuff over the last couple of years, and it's been clear that there have been warnings from within and without the women's game that all was not well. And what happens is that you end up with these results. Like, they've put all their eggs in the basket of qualifying for the Olympics for the sevens team, and they're still not qualified. If they were already qualified, maybe the sevens players would have played for the 15s and the team would have been much better and we could have had a better result. But that hasn't happened, and so there's a possibility we don't end up at the Olympics and we don't end up with a 15s team, and you've tried to serve all the masters and ended up falling in the middle of it and going, oh my God, what is this ruin that we have at the moment? Like, if you're a young, talented athlete and you're looking at the various sports that you can play, why would you pick rugby at the moment?
Totally. And also, like, we've had 5 games showcased on national stage on TV. You can watch these easily, and if that's the only promotion you're getting, the support has been phenomenal, and you can hear it in each match. You can even hear it over the weekend when Ireland scored their try. Like, there is support at these games, and there's so much goodwill towards them, but the players don't want to hear that. They want to go way beyond it. And if you're very much a casual observer and you're on the fence about whether you want to play rugby, as a girl watching that, you're just watching defeat after defeat, and great work ethic and endeavour to improve, but that's the showcase event. 5 games, no wins, all losses. When are we going to see them next? It's very tough.
Every time we
fair play to Greg McWilliams if he's stepping down today, and because that will remove one of the fig leaves that they had. It was like, oh, here's somebody that we've highly rated and we've put him in charge, and he's going to come out week on week and tell us, actually things are changing. That'll stop now, and they're going to have to find somebody else to do that job. So what else is in the Reds for us this morning?
Yeah, we'll move on to Nottingham Forest and Leeds. I know there are plenty of fans in Ireland of both of those clubs steeped in history, but is there time in the Premier League history? Because both of them had very poor weekends, and deservedly, I think, in the red. Will they be in the red at the end of the season? We'll find it over the next few weeks. But Forest started with a 2 undefeated Brentford.
That's cruel.
On Saturday.
Cruel.
It's very cruel for Forest, but you look at the Southampton game they have at home next, and you're like, well, 3 points maybe. Chelsea after that as well, 3 points. No offence to Chelsea. Late winner as well in that game for Brentford from Josh De Silva. Steve Cooper had his qualms and concerns and issues in terms of VAR for that goal, and was there a player offside who was in the goalkeeper's eye line? He wasn't complaining too badly about it, but they had 4 points from their previous 2 games, and that would have been acceptable for Forest given how badly they've been doing. So if you look at them, they're in the relegation zone. They're on 30 points. So that then we're basically saying are gone. So 24 points on the bottom. Everton on 29 points. That's after their 2-2 draw with Leicester last night. And Forest on goal difference, just in the relegation spots ahead of Leeds and Leicester. It's heating up.
You look at Forest, Shane, 81 minutes on the clock there on Saturday, away to Brentford, 1-0 up, having just beaten Brighton midweek. Great result. Everything's flying. Everything's coming up Millhouse for Forest.
They would have been safe.
Ivan Toney's equaliser, and the Josh De Silva goal in the 94th minute, Shane, it squeezes underneath Keylor Navas. We actually have an image of that as well, of Navas. He's just so forlorn and devastated. There he is. For people who can't see, he's just watching the ball in the net. And that could be the everlasting image of this season for Nottingham Forest, that they could go down. I personally would love to see Forest stay up. I think they're good crack. I like their crest. I like their jersey.
Good enough
I like
reason,
their ground. Yeah. I like a lot of their players, and I think Steve Cooper's a great manager at that level. So I hope they do stay up, but that was heartbreaking. And as soon as that result went in, Shane, I was thinking they got to be in the red for the performance rankings, just because it's been a disaster in the sense that 2 days later, no matter what happened last night between Leicester and Everton, they were going to wake up Tuesday morning in the relegation zone, and here they are. But we've said it several times now the last few days, this is an ever so exciting relegation battle, isn't it? Without Southampton, but all the way up to probably 15th West Ham. Very, very engaging.
Potentially. It's going to go down to the last game of the season regardless, you'd imagine, with 4 games left now for all of them, and the points the way they are, and the score difference the way it is. Steve Cooper was making the point, this is what's crucial here. A goal or a decision is going to hinge and decide who goes up and down. He says after the match about that winning goal for Brentford, we really need to know how they've made the call and the image they have made it from. I hope at this stage of the game and the season that they didn't make a call based on an assumption, but the guys are fuming over it, the guys being the players. The subs and the staff could see it fairly live, and we thought it was going to be the opposite decision. So little moments like that, you don't want officials' decisions and VAR calls and images that they use to decide who goes.
Well, they obviously will. That's the lesson of the season, that they obviously will end up costing somebody a place in the Premier League. Forest play Southampton next. If Southampton were to win that, suddenly, then it would still all be to play for the last day of the season. Southampton's fixtures aren't a complete disaster if they were to suddenly find a run from somewhere. It's Forest, Fulham, Brighton, and then on the last day of the season, Liverpool, who may or may not have something to play for.
Leeds United, meanwhile, I mean, they're screwed.
Heavy, grazie. They're all heavy.
They're screwed. 4-1
sacked in the morning, it feels like.
2.5 months in.
So looking for a third manager of the season. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. A 4-1 defeat at Bournemouth, followed that reasonable draw against Leicester that I know Leeds were disappointed with. But the talk is Michael Skubala as interim head coach, the guy that we've seen before already this season. There's talk of Lee Bowyer, Alan Pardew. Big Sam, of course, has been mentioned, as has been mentioned with every single managerial exodus that there has been. Jefferson Lerma scored a couple of great goals for Bournemouth in that match as well. Both the first half. 2 lovely finishes, yeah.
How many matches did Skubala manage? Because this would be their 4th manager then. If he did one more, did he do 2 games?
He did Old Trafford for sure.
He did.
He did one other as well. Maybe 2 or 3. Cameron Hill, I'm sure, a resident Leeds United supporter, would tell us here.
Yeah, it was after Marsh left and Gracia came in. I don't know how many matches exactly it was, but I mean, Patrick Bamford pulls a goal back for Leeds with a header, lovely cross as well.
And Nanto had a chance afterwards. They could have got something from this game, as bizarre as that sounds, at 4-1.
Yeah. So look at Leeds' fixtures. Trip to Manchester City, then they welcome Newcastle to Elland Road, then they have West Ham away and a home game with Spurs on the final day. Leeds are screwed, lads.
Well, they could get 6 points from that. Spurs and they're not going to get anything from Newcastle. They're not going to get anything from City. Spurs, and who was the last one?
West Ham away and Tottenham on the final day.
Not stranger things have happened.
Maybe, but then those next
6 points be enough? I mean, probably no. 36 points might not be enough.
No.
It probably will, actually, because everybody's losing games. Somebody from the Athletic had a stat about 4 of the teams, their last 8 games, the only win was 1 match against each other.
Yeah, it's class. I love that. Speaking of stats, the 23 goals that Leeds conceded throughout April was the most ever in 1 month for a Premier League team.
Right.
Yeah, that'll be the Grazia legacy, unfortunately. I like Grazia. Likeable figure. Wanted to go well for him.
Bad manager though.
I don't know. Got Watford to an FA Cup final. Not sure.
Well, they lost. What's 6-0?
Yeah, well, just got to the final.
Yeah.
Also, just a word on Ivan Toney. 20 Premier League goals this season. Only Harry Kane and Erling Haaland have scored more. I know he's a bit of he's a penalty whiz, but like Andy Johnson was in the noughties. But I think he's far more than that. Like, got a good free kick at the weekend. It should have been saved by Navas. But it was a free from a good bit of distance anyway.
Some other football we need to talk about. Seamus Coleman, a horrific injury.
Horrible.
Yeah.
It's a knee injury. We haven't had a confirmation, but afterwards Sean Dyche said it did look serious.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, he's been geeing up the crowd from the stretcher.
The most Seamus Coleman thing ever all time.
Incredible, yeah. It's a squeamish looking injury, could be the second major horrific injury of his career. You just feel so sorry for him, and naturally, from the Irish perspective, you're thinking of next month's match against Greece, and on that too, Chiedoze Obene went off injured with a hamstring injury against Rotherham as they stayed up in the Championship. His contract is up in the summer as well, so that could be his last game for the club. Be interesting to see where he ends up. But I know, the Coleman injury, it's such a setback, and also for Everton as well. They were fortunate enough; they should have gone 3-1 down in this game. James Maddison had a penalty to put Leicester 3-1 ahead. And I don't know if you saw the picture, the close-up battle of Jordan Pickford's close-up picture of Jordan Pickford's water bottle. There was a clear stat: 60% of Maddison's penalties went down the middle, and Pickford stays still. There's nothing that looks worse from the misser's perspective when the keeper doesn't move and it goes right down the middle and he just palms it away.
It's a terrible penalty.
Yeah, it was awful. I really thought Vardy was going to take it, because that's 2 goals in 2 games for Vardy after going 19 without.
100% of Tielemans go one way. Can't tell if it's right or left from the.
And Tielemans
the
picked up the ball initially. Looked like he was going to take it, and Madison took it off him.
But if you're a strike, so if you're a penalty taker, why not do research like the keeper does the research? Research yourself and go, where would I go if I was the keeper? And then just go the other way, or like change it up in a regular pattern.
You're like one of the early MMA fans. Who are like, educate yourself.
When Kasper Schmeichel was on TV last night after the match, and he was been asked about his process, and he said, "I'm not going to tell you until I retire, but I have a very different process." So he left us all wanting to know more. But every goalkeeper researches differently for these penalties. But yeah, if you have a player like Madison who just puts it down the middle 60% of the time, I mean,
well, that's only 2/3 of the time. 1/3 of the time he does other stuff, and
it's all stats, isn't it? You got to stand still then if it's 60%.
Well,
as a keeper,
the thing is, Pickford does go right and then come back, almost fainting them out.
There was an amazing moment in this game last night where Dominic Calvert-Lewin had a tap in for his second of the game, and I think it hit his heel, or he didn't get. He just timed his momentum wrong,
and
bad miss. Got the weak side of his foot, and then up the other end, Jamie Vardy hits the bar. Look, by the order of chances and the penalty, Leicester probably should have won this game. So Everton can consider themselves fortunate to get something from it. And at the same time, they wake up this morning in 19th place after 34 games. Hard to imagine.
All right, so we're still in the red. You want to do very quick mention?
Oh no, I was just the clap thing. I mean, I thought Spurs were a contender obviously for Amber, but like the sprinting up to the fourth official after Liverpool's goal, and then the hamstring injury, and I knew watching it, I knew that they were going to be like, oh, it's hilarious, what a character, he pulled his hamstring, that's brilliant. And I knew that was going to be the question to him as well afterwards. And in fairness to Patrick Davis and his guy, he probed them a little bit about what was said there, what was said between you and the ref. And of course he had a go at Paul Tierney too, which is unfair. But the thing with Klopp, like he's a bit of a clown, like
he's a dose, that's the word.
Clown, like I thought, like this incredibly charismatic guy, brilliant manager. I enjoyed him a lot initially, but this sprinting up to the fourth official, like he's a bully. He's a bully.
You're like, what was he trying to get out of that? Was he just like?
Well, and then also said afterwards, well, I didn't actually say anything to him, so I think that's fine. Like, I sprinted up to him and he's like, look, it's not cool that I did that, but I didn't say anything. And then I got the hamstring injury, and I think he was basically describing karma without saying it. So he has some level of self-awareness, which actually probably makes it worse because he's going to do this again. And he just picks on people of a lesser standing, which is the definition of bullying.
Yeah, I wonder, are Liverpool fans as sick of those antics as, say, United fans are?
I don't think so, Shane. I mean, you probably get the odd Liverpool fan who doesn't like seeing it, but like, what really annoyed me was, like, I was reading the comments online, and it was like, oh, what a legend, what a character, because of the hamstring injury, and he limps away from it, and he does the chest pump with all his players, and he has this like toxic side to him. But Ireland, just the sprinting up to the fourth official, like, why does the fourth official get it so much in the year? Like, what can they do?
Do you know when people pick their 3 sports people or 5 sports people dead or alive they'd love to have dinner with? He makes my list of people I'd absolutely not want to have dinner with.
I'd say he's brilliant. I'd say you get loads of insight from him. I'd say in a relaxed environment, he's brilliant company. Like, there's so much to him. He's an amazing manager. Like, the way he can consistently, year after year, motivate the same set of players or a new set of players. He's won everything you can at Liverpool. He's been an absolute legend at the club, but I hate this side of him.
Yeah,
hate it, and he'll do it again.
Was he potentially taking away some of the negativity from the team, because they won the game 4-3, having been 3-0 up against the flakiest Spurs side in the history of flaky Spurs sides? Was there analysis done? I didn't see the aftermath of the game.
Yeah.
Was there analysis done of their own collapse? Another collapse from Liverpool in a game?
I think Spurs are so bad that the focus was entirely shifted to them.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're asking what the analysis was like, I think it was that. Yeah,
then they came back. Do you know what I mean? So and now suddenly it's Klopp's hamstring, as opposed to what happened to your team at 3-0 that they couldn't control the game.
That's really annoying thing about modern football too. We're all guilty of it. Is like incidents are analysed more than the football itself. So the Skip and Jota incident was probably the most talked about after Klopp went over to the fourth official. So then third or fourth in the running order is Liverpool throwing away a 3-0 lead, and they had never done that at Anfield before, where they went 3-0 up and drew a game. So Jota, of course, changed that at the end. So it was all about the mistakes and Lucas Moura's mistake at the end, and then Ryan Mason afterwards saying, oh, we were by far the better team, and then Klopp saying, well, like, if Spurs don't just counter all the time and concentrate on actually proactively creating chances, they'd be a bit better.
All right, can we just mention before we move on as well a statement that came in from the Leeds players? I don't know if you saw this last night, lads, the statement about the subsequent post on social media, the walking past the young kid in his Leeds jersey looking for autographs in the hotel. There seems to be a trend that's cropping up quite significantly and quite a lot recently, probably because Leeds lost as well. in the fashion in which they did, that this has made a story. But the whole apology thing in football is really reaching other levels. But I mean, it's not hard to stop for a few kids and sign a few autographs, is it?
No.
Be human.
The NBA playoffs are on at the moment, and it's going to be LeBron versus Steph. It's a 7-game series after Steph went off for 50 points against Sacramento on the road. And we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll start talking about it over the next week or two. But if you're only vaguely interested in the NBA, the time to tune in is now, and LeBron versus Steph might not happen again. I assume LeBron is not injured. I don't think he is. So anyway, that's it.
We'll move on to Amber, and I think we're going to Arsenal. The Arsenal women's team had a Champions League semi-final last night, and a second leg against Wolfsburg, an opportunity to reach a European decider, and Jesus, they were so close. Extra time it went to 2-2 after normal time. Jonas Eidevall speaking after the game about the immense pride, because it was a very, very late winner for Wolfsburg. You're thinking this is heading to penalties, but a very late winner for Paulina Bremer to crush Arsenal 5-4 in aggregate. Crushed them as in their hearts and their resolve and their ambitions of winning in Europe this year, because they were so close, and they showed some serious battle to come back from 2-0 down in the away leg last week, to get back to 2-2 and bring something back to London. A record crowd for a domestic women's game in England as well, over 60,000, where the Emirates sold out for that match last night as well. Katie McCabe hits the crossbar very late on, and you're thinking this is the moment. But if you look at the injury list, Captain Kim Little, you've Leah Williamson and Caitlin Ford in recent weeks, and then of course the long-term ACLs, Beth Mead and Vivian Miedema. So I think that's what Jonas Eidevall was getting at when he spoke about the immense pride, because the bench is thin. The strength and depth is very, very thin with all these injuries that have struck Arsenal. So I guess they had it all to do last night for that second leg, but unfortunately they just couldn't get the job done.
Yeah, they lie in 4th place as well in WSL, but I would have been brilliant to start with Katie McCabe's winner winning today. I was so close, captain, and smashes the woodwork, but very unfortunate. And Wolfsburg have been getting the better of them in the Champions League too. You're looking at what's this? It was back in 2007, I think, wasn't it? Arsenal's last triumph there. So they've gone a long time without, and so close so far. That's why they're in the amber.
But the problem is now they have a little bit of a battle in the WSL to actually qualify for Europe for next season. So they're sitting in 4th at the moment, as I look at it, 2 points behind Chelsea, and they've played one game more. And it's only, of course, as I say, the top 3 that compete in Europe. So, I mean, Arsenal have a job, especially with those injuries, to actually even qualify for Europe next year. So the last number of games in the season.
You mentioned the full house, obviously.
Yeah, of course, that's why it's an amber, because I mean there are positives to take from this. It was really good to see. Fervent atmosphere it appeared, and of course majority Arsenal fans in the Emirates last night, and for a really unbelievable European game under the lights as well. That's just what you want to see. So yeah, probably amber, because considering the injuries, not the worst performance or result in the world, but yeah, they'll be absolutely gutted, and Katie McCabe was clearly gutted afterwards.
All right, in the green.
Yeah, move on to the green, and Clare and Louth, I think deservedly both, for their GA exploits in the respective codes over the weekend. Clare themselves, I've seen the narrative passed across the weekend, lads, that Clare have saved the hurling summer with this result. Possibly, I'm not going to go that far this morning, but Clare 1 goal and 24 points, Limerick 220. We were kind of trying to decipher if these stats before us were correct before the show, but first time Clare have beaten Limerick in a championship game in a Limerick City venue since 1901.
There was incredulity in the studio.
I still don't believe it.
I know, it sounds a bit wrong, doesn't it?
Our sources are correct, Shane, though.
Yeah, they appear to be correct. And look, 30,500 people at that match in Limerick. Kiss of life to the summer, I think Malachy Clerkin described it as. And then you see the injuries to Sean Finn and Cian Lynch for Limerick as well, which might be a slight concern for John Kiley, no doubt.
Why wasn't it on TV?
Lads.
Sure, it was on TV. It was on GA Go.
Yeah, it wasn't on national TV for the most people to see it. Oh my God. And I was listening to it on the radio, and there was columns there as well. It was just so frustrating. And I know I can't please everyone. I totally get that. And you're sharing a lot of stuff on one channel or 2 channels. But there's another channel they could put it on too. And the double header was great on Sunday, but that game, you could have anticipated that was going to be a cracker, because it was so close last year as well. Mm-hmm. That's where the eyes were this weekend, and it didn't it didn't fail to deliver. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And Limerick could have gone ahead. Flanagan, I think, could have scored a goal after about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
It had everything from start to finish, and only a point in it at the end.
And Flanagan's goal could have been a square ball, but then again, you look at it in slow motion and you still can't decipher whether or not it's a square ball. So maybe leave the umpires off on that one.
I don't know. It felt like a square ball at the time, and anyway, I understand why it wasn't given. But we'll talk more about this a little bit later on. If you just listen to this section, go and search for Sarah Donovan in our podcast feed, and we'll get into this in more details. Louth, obviously, we could have done plenty more on them as well. We will do more. I suspect they're surging up the power rankings. They were pretty lucky. They were obviously dominant, but also lucky in that kind of weird way that only happens when you can see goals. And
they led by 4 with 62 minutes gone.
Yeah, and
so they could have thrown it away.
And Samuel Roy came to life in injury in extra time.
20 minutes, first 20 minutes,
sensational from him, and they'll feel pretty good about life against the Dubs in the final. Got to move on. Leinster and Rog. We're going to talk Leinster in just a moment. Rog in the green.
100%. I'm getting a lot of hate, by the way, in the comments. Shane should be ashamed he didn't force Luca Brissell into the green slot. I'm surprised given how much Shane has been plugging the snooker of late. Luca Brissell isn't in the performance rankings. Fergal O'Brien is coming in the studio, so I've managed to squeeze that one. Michael says Shane is definitely on my list of not to have dinner with. Bad enough listening to him at breakfast. Michael, I wouldn't have breakfast with you either, but thanks for that this morning.
You do every morning though, Shane.
Yeah,
tough
of course. Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Michael for that comment. Leinster and Rog. I mean, we've got the fairy tale. The final that we wanted.
I don't know. I would have been much happier if we weren't facing Rog again, to be honest, as a Leinster fan. It would have been much easier.
But I suppose, but I mean, from an excitement and a narrative point of view,
yes,
I mean, we want Rog.
Yes, and obviously, I mean, Rog, we love you now.
But Leinster were dominant, very impressive, similarly to La Rochelle, but 41 points to 22, and it was comfortable.
It wasn't comfortable. My Whoop measures my stress, and it was like 72 minutes of stress. Eventually, in the second half, like, okay, I can finally. Anyway, we're about to talk about this in much more detail. So James Tracy's outside. We're going to get into him. That is this week's Gillette Labs performance rankings. Up next, Keith Tracy on Liverpool Spurs, and then James Tracy in studio.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
So Liverpool in that first 15 minutes at home, they've won their last 3 games. Like, they're at it. You mentioned the fact that he picked both Jones and Elliott. Generally, it's been 2 experienced midfielders and one of the kids, whether it was Bajcetic earlier in the season. Elliott had a run, dropped out after the City defeat. Now Jones has been getting a run. The interaction between those two and then the 3 attackers in that first 15 minutes, like that's I guess the positive for Liverpool, is that up top, like Gakpo, Luis Diaz come back, first start in 7 months. Salah always a threat. They've got Firmino not even in the squad. Nunez to come off the bench. Diogo Jota comes off the bench. Like, that's the positive out of this for Liverpool, which we know they've no problems there whatsoever.
No, like we said, up the top of the pitch, Liverpool are still Liverpool, especially at home. I think they've only been beaten once in the last 39 Premier League games. So Liverpool are still very, very good at home. Away from home, they've been a little bit flaky, but the movement that when Gakpo drops into the midfield, sort of like what Kane does for Spurs, when he drops into that midfield, when you've got the likes of Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott who have the legs to go and get beyond him, it's such a big threat because the centre half can see the body's running beyond them and he doesn't know whether to stick or twist, go or stay. And like I said, Eric Dyer was making all the wrong decisions in the first half. In the second half, he seemed to get a bit better. Gakpo wasn't quite up to it, but there were so many key battles in this game that Spurs weren't coming out on top of. When you think of Perisic against Alexander Arnold, Pedro Porro against Andy Robertson, and Harvey Elliott, Fabinho, Curtis Jones against Højbjerg and Skip, Liverpool were better all over the park. But like you say, Spurs just sort of stuck around in it. Kane got his goal, and I felt Liverpool come off it a bit. I don't think Spurs went and really wrestled the game back. I thought Liverpool, I don't want to be disrespectful and say they gave them the game back, but Spurs did a bit. Liverpool weren't great, and look, Spurs, it's unacceptable, really. It is. I know we can say, listen, they've only been beaten 4-3, but to give yourself a mountain to climb like that after 15 minutes of football, especially what happened in St James's Park a week ago, it really is unacceptable. But it looks, I said it in the commentary, they look like a team with no fear. They're not afraid what's going to hit them in the dressing room.
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. The Football Pod.
Jack O'Connor said, don't ever read a paper, it softens your head. It turns your mind to mush. You're kind of thinking, why did he say that? Or what did he mean by that? Or does he rate him higher than me? It opens up something that you do not want opened.
The only thing inter-county players should be looking at or listening to is the Football Pod.
Subscribe to the Football Pod wherever you get your podcasts. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, 4 minutes past 8. Delighted to say James Tracy is with us to pick through a brilliant performance by Leinster at the weekend. It was right up there in terms of their European performances, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think to be fairly satisfied with how it went. You know, we had a couple of uglier wins throughout the year. but that was definitely a very pleasing performance, and probably inflated a tiny bit by the yellow card periods, but I still think they were in control and really executed the game plan. And there was a lot of slick play, and the kicking was excellent. I just thought they controlled them really well. They were never going to hold Toulouse out. They're like, Toulouse are such an amazing attacking side. They're always going to get a few scores.
That first 10 minutes was this wild roller coaster of up down, and you're kind of like, oh, Leinster haven't had the ball here. But then when they did get the ball, they would score.
Yeah, so I think like what set the tone anyway for me in discipline was that first kind of. So Ramos had done that incredible 50-22, and they'd scored off the back of that, and straight away off the kickoff, Leinster, you turn over the ball and they give away like a seatbelt tackle on Ringrose, and it was just like every time they'd have a good moment, they'd follow it with two bad moments, and it was just that was kind of their downfall. I feel like they were kind of getting in the way of themselves, just in that respect. I think. It's such a pleasure to watching Dupont at 9, but he's so dangerous and just so abrasive. If you could just see, that you're kind of following around like herding sheep, because like it's just you don't want to get you don't want to break the chain in the line, because once he takes on one person and you miss him, he's gone.
Yeah,
he's incredible.
Like beating 3 or 4 of the world's best tacklers, in the space of 5 yards. Oh my God, this is. But then he would run into traffic, and was that a function of them moving him out of 9 as much as anything? Because during the game, Andy Dunn was like, they've made 4 positional switches here to accommodate the injury that they've had, which doesn't really make that much sense. And then afterwards, Leo Cullen was like, well, we've actually seen him play a 10 recently, and we had planned for that. So they'd obviously done their homework, and they knew that this was a possibility. But it doesn't make sense, does it? So
the reason why they did it is they went for a 6-2 split on the bench. So you're losing one of your kind of utility backs, and you're basically banking that you're gonna like beat the other pack up. So you're stacking your bench with forwards, and you're just trying to go after their pack, whether it be scrum, line out, breakdown, everything. So you're telling the guys you're starting, you empty the tank, because we nearly have a full pack ready to come on. But the downside to that is you get one injury in the backs and you have everyone playing out of position, and you're just juggling around. Dupont is you could put him anywhere and he'd be very good, but he's the best 9 in the world, so you want him playing 9.
Yeah.
And that's probably the frustrating part for Toulouse, but that's the tactical side of the game, where sometimes you push the chips in and it doesn't go your way.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it.
As a player in Leinster, right, when you see the change happening and you're looking around going, they're going to be getting Dupont on the ball maybe 35% less than he would be if he was at every breakdown.
Yeah.
I'm delighted about that, right?
Oh, if you're defending around the breakdown, happy days. He's at out half. You have a lot more people around you.
You can line him up from a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not as 1-on-1. Well, the ball's quick, and you're either like folding around the ruck, or you're getting back after a line break. He's looking for your body language on what you're looking at, where you're standing, how you're standing, and you don't have time to fix it. While when the ball's in the air from one pass, all of a sudden you have more read time and you have more people around you to help you. It makes someone like him, what he's unbelievable at, it just kind of like mitigates it a little bit, and probably to their own detriment. But as I said, it comes from that 6-2 split, which is it works. Like South Africa would use it quite a lot, and they have these giants coming on and do a great job, but that's the downside.
And Paul Grau's passing is a bit more telegraphed slightly than Dupont's, so you almost have that element of speed and fear factor just completely gone when Dupont's gone from 9.
Yeah, and I listen, there's no slight on whoever comes in to replace Dupont. You're replacing the best player in the world, so no one is going to be as good right now anyway. So it's always going to be a slight step down. But I thought he had a good game. Again, it was just you're kind of taking, you're taking the best player out of position, so it's not going to be as effective. But I think when you peel it all back, that's not why they lost the game. They lost the game through discipline, and that was really it. It was discipline and Leinster forcing them into pressure situations with really clever attacking kicks and attack, and they defended very well as well. They'd be satisfied with that.
It was super ruthless as well in terms of attack from Leinster. Like you would have said, if the score had been closer to even at half time, that might have been a reflection in terms of possession and control, but Leinster were absolutely efficient and ruthless whenever they got the opportunity.
Yeah, and you know, they would have obviously practiced to get all of your attacking plays right and really well, and Toulouse did a good job a few times at coming up with a few big turnovers, and that's going to be the same kind of threat down the road, whether it be the Sharks this weekend or La Rochelle in the final. Like, there's going to be an unbelievable amount of pressure on the breakdown. But I thought Leinster's breakdown work was phenomenal. I thought James Ryan again, if you get a chance to play or cam him and some of his clean out work, it's top drawer, and it creates a space then for other people, because he's taken one or two people off their feet in the breakdown, and just been very, very effective at his job.
Ross Maloney got the start, which was obviously a big vote of confidence for him. It means you've got Jason Jenkins in reserve for when the big pack reserves are coming on for Toulouse. It's almost as if maybe we underrated how much development and evolution he's had and the pack have had, and also afterwards they're like, oh, we've learned how to play against bigger men. So that narrative that we've all had, that if you trace back all the defeats since they last won it, has been big man for Saracens, big man for Saracens, big man for La Rochelle, big man for La Rochelle. It's obviously a complete distillation down to one thing, which rugby never is, but they seem to have understood ways to deal better with that threat of the giants.
Yeah, it's to a certain extent. I feel like a few of the games that they've lost, like the La Rochelle game came down to the last play, and what it really turned on was the bounce of a ball. So if you remember, there was a drop kick kind of to nothing. It bounces probably half a foot from the dead ball line, and back into the field. Johnny catches it. He proceeded, he was going to kick, shapes the kick, and I can't remember who he took it, but anyway, they followed the kick. So Johnny passes it to Hugo, who gets tackled, and eventually turned the ball over. And it's like, if that ball goes dead, you're back in the opposition half, and all of a sudden you're 2 scores ahead, and it's a different game, and that final period is just kind of all in the management. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. But this is the small margins, so you get that right. Leinster were in control for a lot of that final, and La Rochelle just did a brilliant job of clawing their way back in, and it comes down to little moments, and you just win one or two more little moments, and that's all it is. And people are quick to point at big, what seem obvious things, but it's not always that.
Pre-game, going through it, was like, ooh, Leinster are missing a few key players, and we still talk about Sexton. Henshaw came out late in the week, and James Lowe, 3 elite players who you would genuinely say are in contention for being in any team, in any world class, right? Whatever you mean by that. And looked like Toulouse had beefed up their team from last year, and Dupont and Ntamak. But I was actually worried before the game, and then as the game went on, you're like, wow, Leinster are really, really good. One of the things that really surprised me was just how good Charlie Natai was. I thought he was in contention for man of the match because of the things that he did when he did them.
Yeah, he's incredible. So we would play it against Leon, and he's been a standout player for so long. Jamesy Gibson Park, actually, they go way back into school, and he said he was probably one of the most talented schools players that he's ever seen. So he was kind of over the chuffed that this guy was coming to Leinster. We'd only kind of seen bits of when we'd been playing in Europe against them, but anything we'd seen, he was class. He comes in and just one of the most skillful guys, and he's an unbelievable step and jinkiness to him, but he's quite a solid man.
Oh yeah, huge tackles.
Oh, and incredible the offload he gave to Rob Russell in the corner. In the RDS was he's getting dragged and touched by 2 people, and it just flicks it up under. It was just, he has these little touches of skill that are incredible. And I think his 50-22 was a huge turning point. He had a huge poach even at one point in the first half. That was another big turning point in the game. and he'll bring a real coolness and calmness to that back line, as well as having those class kind of touches.
And he hadn't played since January.
That's the nearly more impressive thing.
Yeah.
Like, he comes straight back in and you almost forget about Robbie Henshaw.
I think, well, we definitely don't forget about Robbie Henshaw, but the thing is, when you're experienced like him, it's easier to kind of step back in. You don't have those same nerves and everything like that. I wouldn't have been worried at all about him slotting back in, just because of his age profile, how experienced he is, how much of a leader he'd be in that group. He would have been chomping on the bits playing those sorts of games. Like, that's why he came to Leinster, was to be involved in those sorts of days, especially against friends. It's a lot of familiar scenarios to him. He would have known a lot of those players, played against them a lot, so he would have been happy out and leading the charge in the build up in the week.
I don't know who got, was it Gibson Park got the man of the match in the stadium possibly? Yeah. But like, who stood out most of all for you? Like, you had Dan Sheehan and James Ryan, brilliant as well. Natai we've mentioned. Like, there was a number of options there you could have
I thought the 2 second rows were unbelievable. I think, like, Ross Maloney's been an unsung hero for so long. James Ryan, we know, is incredible. He again, as I said, he was amazing. But I thought like, it was a lot of pressure. Probably isn't a big narrative around it because he did well. But Ross Byrne, if he'd had a bad game, he would have been out with the pitchforks. I thought he was phenomenal. He just steered the ship so well, so calm, so confident, and just that's the years of performing and doing well when the spotlight was on everyone else is kind of coming to fruition now, and
all the games he's played.
Yeah, and I think as well, Conan at 8, like, reminding everyone why he's a Lions test starter, and I'd picked him at 6. Still back that decision, but he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think, like, to balance that back row is looking good, whatever way you want to play it. But I'm delighted for him now that he's back in form, not just the tries, but he had a lot of very good involvements around the field. So to answer your question, I've given a few players there, but I think there was quite the thing is, I wouldn't like to be doing man of the match unless it's quite obvious on the day, but like, there was probably a lot of guys that were worth looking at, and just, again, understanding of game scenarios and everything like that. I thought it was just a really, really good day.
Saw someone pointing out about Ross Byrne afterwards, I think they used the phrase, this is his team now, and there is a sense of leadership about Ross Byrne as well, isn't there, of late, that he's really taken the position and made it his own. And
in fairness, as I said, he's been probably doing that for 3, 4, 5 years, but you probably don't see it as much until now when you're on centre stage. So I've known him as that leader, but it's great now that he's finally doing it. He's finally been recognised for it on the big stage, so it's been good.
Jimmy O'Brien's evolution into a winger at this level, where James Lowe is out, but there's no step down, it feels like.
Yeah, again, different type of player, I think. But yeah, he's, as I said, I didn't see winger coming. Like I said, I could see him playing any position, but winger, I did not see him getting to this level at it, and I'm just delighted for him. He's the most talented lad I saw go through Newbridge College in my time. I remember watching him, single-handedly clawing back a Senior Cup semi-final and getting into the next game, and just thinking, wow, this kid's got something else.
He was playing out half at that stage.
He was playing everywhere. He was playing 12 out half, and he wasn't taking the kicks, and scored the try in the corner and grabbed the ball and kicked the conversion from the touchline. And you're just like, this kid is.
Is his future at wing? Like, it may well be, given the age profile of the other wingers. And he must be beginning to put some pressure on those wingers for the Ireland team. Or if you were like thinking long term now, should he try and become a centre? Do you just take whatever you can get when you're getting into the Ireland team?
I think he will take whatever he can get, but it'll be wing for right now, and then if an opportunity opens up somewhere else, he'll seamlessly slot in there. He's the benefit of being very good at a lot of positions. He's now at a level where he could actually be a winger, or he could be whatever. A lot of utility, don't want to say utility for him, but because he kind of falls into that bracket. But a lot of utility are kind of like decent at everything. At least he's at a level now where he could be a starting winger, no problem. He could be a starting full back, no problem.
definitely put you in the conversation for the 23 on match day anyway.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, he'd be like nailed down in my mind anyway. Right now, that's kind of his jersey. If he's not starting, like if he keeps this sort of form up, he could find his way on the field.
A note here, slightly different from Dennis Ryan. Ask James about the Porter non-yellow/red card right in front of Barnes. Irish provinces get a lot of the rub of the green from the referees. Toulouse fans not happy with the refereeing.
Yeah, I feel like it's very frustrating when you're away, right? You feel like everything does go against you, and that's the crowd, everything like plays a difference. Like the old dodgy French TV staff, and like we don't show the replays for different. But I feel like that's like we that's our perspective because we're looking at it from that, and I'm sure they feel the same looking the other way.
Well, we didn't see a replay of it in the stadium, so I actually saw it in real time.
And if it was in France, we would have been given out. So I feel like that's the home advantage. I didn't feel like it was a yellow card, definitely not a red card. It was probably was a little bit late and maybe a penalty, a little bit silly, but 100% wasn't a card. I didn't feel like, like you look at the bits of like the Toulouse ill discipline at times,
madness,
like the flying headbutt, and like I saw some people talking about like, Van der Fleer milks a bit. He gets clocked by this giant in the jaw, and then he's entitled to counter ruck, right? So if they're setting up a ruck to kick, you want to put kick pressure on the 9 by attacking the ruck. He's standing upright. That's a cue. So like if they're not looking at you or they're standing upright, there's your 2 cues that it's a good opportunity to try counter ruck this fella. He's standing upright and like come at me, right? So anyway, first attempt, and he clocks him in the jaw, and he's like, right, well, he's still standing upright, so I should probably have another go with this again. And then he clobbers him again with his head, like he's trying to hit, like he's trying to hit. He's trying to get him.
Yeah.
And then you have the tight head then kind of like tussles him to the ground. It's like shoving his head into the ground, and then they're wondering why they're getting a sent off or whatever. But like maybe they let that go in the top 14, but like. Come on, it's common sense there. There's been I call that like being a dummy tough man, where like you're acting like the big man or whatever, but like there's plenty of ways where you can assert dominance and aggression in a way that's not a penalty or a yellow card, but like that is just like mindless stuff.
I must talk to you about the scrum, but we'll get time to do that again. I do want to talk to you about the refereeing, because the refereeing is going to be very important in the final, right?
Massively. I feel like the French teams, and watching that La Rochelle game, last few La Rochelle games, like they really pushed the boundaries on the breakdown. Okay, so how are you going to stop Leinster? At source, breakdown is seems to be kind of the narrative of how they go about it. So we are kind of dependent a lot on having good officials, because if they get away with kind of not holding their body weight and just killing the ball, there's not much you can do really, and it's very frustrating when they give clean purchase on the ball, but a lot of times they're not on their feet and they just get rewarded for time after time, and they might get pinged once or twice, but then the momentum swings and they're getting rewarded for it. And again, another thing that frustrates me is like Bougarit off the back of the line out, like he breaks the 15 so much, so like the ball, you're not allowed to break the 15 as the hooker.
Breaking the 15 is.
So you're standing on the 15 as the hooker. You're not allowed to leave into open play until the ball is left either the jumper who's caught its hands, or one of the back line approaches 10. So then again, he breaks. So they have to be 10 metres back. When they break that 10 metres, then the line it's over as well. Or if, say, it's a maul, it moves forward, the ref's arm goes down, line out's over. So there's a few things, but they always chance their arm of, so it'll be caught here, he'll already be 2 metres outside, because then once it's off the top, he's already built that space in the seam between the you
can't attack
that you can't attack into, and it's just so frustrating to watch. But hopefully there's good officiating and stuff like that, because if they're killing the breakdown all the time, it's gonna like ruin the game a little bit. So I hope that
does that become a topic of conversation now that we've raised it in the build up to this? Is that the type of thing that if you were involved with Leinster, that they would be briefing the referee saying, here's the video, we're just saying this is a thing, it's just something we've noticed. You can do what you want with the referee.
I've never been involved in those conversations, so I wouldn't know. You'd have to ask Leo on that. But it's definitely something that I can say now because I'm not in it. But I was felt at the time. I remember looking at the footage, just been like, your body is incredibly good at disrupting, but a lot of the time not legally. And you've a lot of guys that are incredibly good at disrupting play, like Skelton. He's good at like lying on top of people, and he's got a lot of things, but I mean he's very good at the dark arts. And I feel like he gets away with a lot of it as well. And listen, a lot of those, they're all world class at rugby, but they're also world class at the dark arts, and I feel like it's a part of the game that it's just very frustrating when they're getting away with it.
All right, well the build-up has officially started. James, good stuff. It's a really busy. Every game is at the Aviva for Leinster from now on. The RDS, I think, is unavailable because of its concert season and various other reasons. So that's good and bad in some ways.
Yeah. I think we've a tough run in. Like we've a knockout game this week, and then like hopefully another knockout game. While the likes of La Rochelle you don't necessarily need to win their two games. They're away games, but they don't need to win them necessarily. Like the Sharks, the South African teams are incredibly attritional to play against as well. So it's going to be a tough few weeks. I feel like the Aviva is a special place to play. So they'll relish that. But let's hope there's somewhat close to a full house, if not a full house, because that's what really makes it. It's the atmosphere, and that's the home advantage part, And
the final is sold out. Leinster fans bought tickets early and often, it turns out.
Yeah.
So I think the atmosphere for the final should be very special. Good stuff, James. Thanks a million for joining us. It's 8:25 this morning. Now we're going to be hosting a live UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat this Thursday evening. That's the 3rd of May at the Mansion House in Dublin. Joined by UEFA Champions League winners John O'Shea and Wes Brown. It's going to be a brilliant night's entertainment. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited, so don't delay. It is a Manchester United special. Go to offthewall.com/events. We will see you on the night. Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League. Up next, Vinny Perth talking League of Ireland. Here's Cian Tracy and Fionn Davenport with Joe on yesterday's pay-per-view, on Sunday's pay-per-view talking Leinster.
Plenty of coverage in the papers about it. Like Neil Francis is kind of interesting, taking the line of what kind of ramifications will this have for France at the World Cup, which is interesting because they obviously had a bit of a mixed Six Nations, but the performance at Twickenham, you'd have to say, kind of at the end left you kind of going, okay, they're still going to be unbelievable. So it was more evidence, I think, to suggest that Leinster and Irish teams have figured out how to play against the power teams. We were kind of discussing it off air, just the sheer size of the Toulouse second rows. Manny Miafu is 140 kg and Richie Arnold is 120 kg. These are the kind of profiles that Irish teams have struggled against in the past, and obviously Leinster are going to play the winners of La Rochelle and Exeter today, and I suppose no one kind of sums up that kind of size than Will Skelton, and he's been kind of Leinster's kryptonite over the last few years. But I think the way they handled Toulouse was really, really encouraging. Not sure how good preparation it is for, if we assume it's going to be La Rochelle, not to be disrespectful to Exeter, but I would fully expect La Rochelle to win. So for Leinster, it's all about managing the next few weeks. It's just a crazy schedule when you actually put it down in black and white. So next weekend they're going to play the Sharks in the URC quarter-final. If they win that, they've got a semi-final, then a Champions Cup final, and then potentially a URC final. So we speak so often about Leinster's strength and depth, and we're going to see that tested to the absolute core, I think, over the next.
You get more of that goodness if you subscribe to the Sunday pay-per-view podcast. Now, Vinny Perth is with us to look back at a busy weekend of League of Ireland action. Old pal in the comments wants us to ask about Sligo Rovers. They get little to no coverage. Always the Dublin clubs just massive 3 points away yesterday with 10 first-team injuries. So we should start there, should we?
Yeah, and who's that old pal? I absolutely agree, because I've seen them twice the weekend. I was in Tallaght Stadium against Shamrock Rovers. Really unlucky to lose. I thought they were exceptional. And then in Richmond Park yesterday, what was a different type of performance, but they were very, very good yesterday in terms of beating St. Pat's 1-0. So no, I was really impressed with them. It's interesting because their Penarker, their centre half, stepped out, passed the ball to the right back. I'm going to struggle to pronounce his name now, but there you go. Bran Flack from Sweden, who crosses it to Max Mata from New Zealand, who scores. So it's interesting because where the league is at, and all of these things come into lots of discussion every year. Where's the standard, where it's not? But we definitely need an influence of players from outside of the league. And Sligo's recruitment has been exceptional. Limerick, someone said to me, if he was half a yard quicker, he'd be outstanding. But if he was half a yard quicker, he probably wouldn't be playing in our league. But he is an exceptional player in our league. Hartmann, who's out injured at the moment again, a German, has been brilliant for them. So Estonian is Laverick. So there's players from all over the world playing for Sligo and many other teams, by the way, but in particular Sligo. And I think they've been exceptional, done really, really well. Young manager there, John Russell, has done a great job for them, and they're right in the mix for European spots.
First clean sheet of the season as well. I think it's someone said 9 goals for Max Mata so far this season. So there are lots of positive things for Sligo to look at and to go forward. Like, what's the ceiling for them this season?
I think it's European football. I think getting back into European football, and you know, Sligo, they were dealt a really difficult hand this weekend. So over the bank holiday weekend, they were sent up to Tala the way the fixtures fell, and then up to Richmond Park on bank holiday Monday. But to come out with the way they did, they were really unlucky. As I said, they should have beat Shamrock or should have got something out of the Rovers game, and then to go up to Tala or up to Richmond Park in a different performance, but dug it out. So I think European football is definitely there for them. Max Mata has led the line for them in those 2 games brilliantly, and albeit they fatigued, I think Pat's probably fatigued more than they did in as the game wore on yesterday.
We said last week that these back-to-back games were going to be really interesting just in terms of teams' various abilities. This is a slightly random tangent, but Carl Denny had a great piece in the Sunday Independent yesterday where he interviewed an athletics coach, an Irish athletics coach who's based out in the US, John Coughlin, who's training Olympic gold medalists and World Cup winners, but he has actually been involved in the League of Ireland in the past and with Andy McEntee at Meath, and he says in Irish sport it's strength and conditioning, and he would actually refer if it was conditioning and strength, because the strength is far less relevant. And he talked about being able to make people faster. So when you bring up the right back, you know, it's a technique issue, and that everybody can continue to work on their speed. Are we like, because that's one of those things that doesn't require facilities, right? It doesn't require a huge amount of investment.
Well, you said it was a tangent, right? So to go off on one real quickly, I went to watch Dublin and Derry, my first ever inter-county game live, for that reason, to see what was in this, what could I get out of it. And I think as a country in sport, I actually I was listening to the paper review while I was out and about as opposed to reading that article, but I was listening to it yesterday morning going, yeah, he's so right. There's too much emphasis on physical conditioning. So in terms of size and bulk over speed, and it should be speed and power as opposed to power and speed.
Yeah, weights for dates.
Yeah, and you see it with some players, right? So as the summer comes along, all of a sudden they want to make sure their arms are decent and different things, and it's about getting the top of strength and conditioning coach. I remember we played a European game, and I stood in the tunnel, and Dundalk were known as a really big team, and we played the side, it'll come back to me, but we stood in the tunnel. I remember speaking to Danny Miller, who's head of medical or physiotherapist at the Irish international team now, saying, we're bigger than them. Okay, Karabakh, it was Karabakh, big European club, and he's like, yeah, the 2 of us. And I hit home, and we had for a long period after that, we said we were actually becoming too big.
Yeah,
we need to come back a little bit, and you see that with a lot of European players that you play against now or are coming into the league. Their frames are a lot smaller, and they're able to move over the ground, I would say, a little bit quicker. And it's finding that little niche or that little sweet spot where you've got someone right in the right moment. And it's probably, and going back to Gaelic, I would say to you, coming away from that, and this is right, so this will probably upset a lot of people, but I'm going to throw it out there. Stop bloody spending so much time in the gym and learn how to kick the ball out of your hands and move around the pitch quicker. And I came away from it going, why aren't he moving the ball quicker out of hands? I spoke to a couple of GAA coaches that I'd know, and he was like, I'm saying, I'd say some fella is going, statistically, if you pass the ball over 30 metres, the chances of keeping possession are down. I'm saying, okay, so improve the quality of your kick pass. And I'd say in terms of the skill of Gaelic. As a football person, I could be completely wrong. I would say if you got that fundamental part right and improved that, because the ball will you can move the ball 30-40 yards with a kick quicker. So it is definitely something that's should be watched by all people coaching in
you should go later in the summer when there's more high stakes involved. I think there might be better examples of teams who are more likely to be doing the thing that they want to do and revealing their full hand.
Yeah, no, I felt to be fair, Dublin really impressed me as the game wore on against Derry. It was in the final in terms of they were willing to kick it into forwards who were making more movements, and they looked like they had more set plays, for want of a better word, than Derry at the time. But that's just a as I said, an overview from someone who knows nothing about the game.
It turns out that Derry were roping it up against a little bit that day because they were much better last weekend. But to go back to the point about the fitness, it's weekends like this where being properly conditioned really helps you. And I don't think it's any coincidence that at the end of the weekend, Shamrock Rovers are second. They've got Bows up this week. The ominous run that they've been on, they're reeling Bows in, and Bows obviously had a big win yesterday, but couldn't get the job done to get the 6 points over the weekend that we talked about being really important for them.
Yeah, it would have given them a huge buffer. Like they'd been 7 points clear going into the game this weekend, putting pressure on Rovers we need to
win
draw. We need to go and win, and that's ultimately what the concern is of people. And when you look at that, I sadly went from Richmond Park over to Dalymount Park at 5 o'clock, and then went home and watched Rovers and Derry live on telly. So I got 3 games in yesterday. Now, for those wondering how do you get away with that, I ended up doing the ironing while I was watching the Derry game. So that's
fair enough.
Give and take in life. But the point about it, the 2 games back to back was that you could see teams. Cork really struggled yesterday. I have a bit of fear for them. You could see both Pats and Sligo struggling in those second games, and our players, when you compare it to Championship where you play 48 games, or you play League 1, League 2, the intensity that's required, and you would feel Shamrock Rovers have that in their strength and depth. And you look at the game against Derry yesterday, and I think Derry's starting 11, if the game was played or the season was played with just 11 players, they're not far off Shamrock Rovers. The strength and depth in Rovers squad means the Friday Monday isn't a big deal in terms of changing people around, and it looks like I just thought they were exceptional yesterday. And what's brilliant about them is people are talking about Jack Bourne, who's been out like different class in our league, but when I watched him against Bowls a couple of weeks ago, it was one of the midfielders. It was Gary O'Neill. One of the central midfielders, Dylan Watts, was outstanding. When I watched him down in Pats a couple of weeks ago, Dan Cleary was outstanding. And there's always someone else, and that's where you've hit a sweet spot as a manager, a league winning team, where yes, you've got your stars, whether it's Bourne and Burke, but when someone else is popping up every week with a man of the match performance, then you're like, yeah, this team is motoring, and they look exceptional.
There was an expectation before the season, with all due respect to how Bows are playing now, that Derry would be the team involved in the title race with Rovers. Like, a lot of mistakes from Derry in that game at the weekend. Would you expect that they can still mount some sort of a challenge?
This is the challenge, and I have to be careful not to sound bitter here, but I really rate this Rovers team. I think it's one of, but when you think of the Grey Shells team, the Dundalk team recently, they've always been pushed, and somebody needs to push this Rovers team, and I don't feel anyone is close enough yet to push them. Now, whether Derry can strengthen in the window, whether like missing Conley, Cameron Dummigan and Patrick McElhenney from yesterday's game is a hammer blow to them. I think Rovers could have dealt with 3 players of that magnitude, but Derry can't. And this Rovers team needs to be pushed, and also not just for the sake of the league and different bits and pieces, but pushed to make them even better again.
Yeah.
And I think Cork pushed us onto another level. And also we pushed Cork on at different stages. But I remember in 2017 season, we had a real hangover from 2016 Europa League and different things. We started the season slow, but Cork just won like 9 out of 10 games, and you couldn't catch them. And you need that to push it on. And that's my fear about the league at the moment, is this Rovers team are so far ahead. it doesn't feel like anyone's able to catch them.
Not even Bows.
Well, look, Bows have, it's 13 games in, they're 4 points clear. So this game on Friday is huge for them.
Yeah, huge for them. It's like you wouldn't be terribly shocked if Bows were to beat Rovers in this fixture of all fixtures. The fact that they have the 4 point lead would obviously, it would.
Yeah, and the concern will be for Bows. Bows were completely outplayed against Rovers a couple of weeks back. So it's about what the makeup of the team, how the Bows approach it. Did he look at doing something slightly different in that game, because they were outdone, a bit more expectation on Rovers maybe in this game, particularly in Tallaght. So did he look at something slightly different where they try and counter attack against them? But it's set up to be a brilliant game. Atmosphere will be huge. There'll be no spare tickets, and it will be, you would imagine, a brilliant advertisement for the league again. So it's set up brilliantly that the two biggest rivals in Irish football are now rivaling each other at top of the table, which is perfect.
And there's a sustainability about this Bows evolution. Like, they're really well run, they're proper community focused. This isn't a manager it's not the back of a genius manager who is going to leave. It's not the back of one great player who is going to get transferred. It's built slowly over a number of years.
Yeah, and it's also now the icing on the cake is the likes of Pat Fanlon coming into the club. It is having, Trevor Crawley's now working within the academy there, so they've done it in a really structured way that it is a slow burner. And people will say to you Dundalk will dominate, or Rovers will dominate the league for years and years and years, and they may do, but football doesn't work that way. It cycles, and it just takes one slip of a couple of bad signings here or there, or something to go against you, and then someone else will be waiting in the wings. And we see that in world football, like particularly leagues similar to ourselves, whether it's in Scandinavia, whether it's Eastern European leagues. You see like Bate Barca for years and years and years being the ones that win their league, and then all of a sudden they're not, and it's the same in so many different leagues.
We talked last time you were in about the funding issue, and since then it has kind of taken off a little bit. Now, it hasn't quite crossed over into the mainstream political debate just yet, but it's in the ether, and it feels like football people are actually a bit pissed off by the fact that they've been spoken down to by Leo Varadkar. When you were out and about at the games, we had a bit of a discussion about it, where we probably agreed to disagree on the point in terms of us pitching against horse racing. But I've probably come around to I've spoken to Aidan O'Riordan actually during the week. And the first point is, I should have known by his dodgy jumpers he's a Balls fan. Okay, so I said he was a Pats fan. But I've spoken to him, and I'll probably meet him over the next week or two, because there is people now who are interested in it, and it's not just tokenism or people looking to meet someone like me for whatever reason, just to get a bigger insight into how to shape the argument. But I'll probably come around to the idea that it wasn't a bad thing that the cage was rattled. I was a little bit in fear that by doing that we would have got the response we got, and whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. But I think for the participation numbers in Irish soccer, I think we've got to get more. And I think, like yesterday in Richmond Park, the amount of kids and families and different bits and pieces, and the weather was good, and as like we've got to give society something more. Football yesterday, I'm not sure where League of Ireland football is in terms of standard and quality, and that's always a debate. But what I will say is the games are really entertaining. Like Sligo and Pats yesterday was end to end. Both teams were really tired and they gave up chances, and like as a coach you're looking at that going, should they be a bit fair, should they do this, should they play this system? But actually as a supporter, you're up and down off your seat. Yeah,
there's people travelling all over the country from Sligo to go Friday up to Tallaght and then up to Inchicore, and there was a huge support from Sligo again yesterday, so people are interested in this.
My instinct is that the fear comes from a position where the league was told that it was the problem child by the organisation whose job it was to grow it, and so there's a natural hangover from that, and that hangover has to be chiselled off, and the only way to do that is to get everybody together. And maybe the right thing to do is not to go and attack the other sports. Maybe the right thing to do is to build a coalition of willing people, and some of them will flare off and go, well, that's not fair over here. But if everybody actually was to realise that they need each other.
Yeah, there's a revolution happening in Irish soccer, okay? Now where that is, I'm not sure, okay? It's bubbling and it's coming along nicely. Like, going back to the first point about Sligo, when you go to their ground, so people in Dublin don't look outside of Dublin sometimes. When you go to Sligo's ground, community built, fan led, self-funding, brilliant, and a decent stadium. I'm sure they got a certain amount of funding. So when you see what people can do, and you can see where they're taking it to, but the rewards are huge for communities, for footballers, and it's also then the knock-on effect for 14s, 15s, 17s, 19s, and women's football has had a huge growth with the League of Ireland clubs. League of Ireland clubs have always been hammered for different reasons. But the one thing they seem to have done well is the ladies' game. Now, you must give them credit for that, and people must give them credit for that, because it's growing that sport that maybe in 16 years' time or 12 to 16 years' time, we're at regular World Cups with the ladies' game, and it will become of what was done. That was the FEI led, don't get me wrong, but it's like Pats have just introduced it now. Rovers have done it recently. Obviously the strength with Shelbourne over the years, but so there's a lot of really good things happening. I just think we're tarnished, and the thing you tend to hear is, sure, why would you give the FEI money? Sure, look what they done with the money before. Exactly. And that's so degrading, and that's just like saying, well, we've given banks back money. We've given, just get on with it.
New brew, yeah. And here, but I think if there's a long-term plan, and the long-term plan shows a more healthy country, grassroots, better facilities for kids, more kids playing into their middle age, like this is a really easy story to piece together.
But it's so hard because we're actually so political as well in Irish football that we probably need a dictator. And we've had one, so we don't need a dictator. But so how do you explain that? What I mean by that is we're bloody shutting down a lot of the pitches now for the summer.
Well, I don't really understand this, right? Because we've just had the wettest. Was it the wettest February or the wettest March? Was February all dry and March was
yeah? The next, I think it was March. Yeah.
And so like there's no matches, and it's all everybody's away in the summer. I think whoever's around should just play.
Yeah, like if a team of 15 have 3 players missing, so what? Like just play games. Like and the argument with, what about parents if you play, say, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, or Sunday, Tuesday, whatever, 3 days a week? Well, they're probably going to bring the kids somewhere that week, training Tuesday, Thursday in a match. So get them out on these grass pitches that the council are now going around cutting and different bits and pieces. And so we do need some like real strong leadership with our game. It's as I said, I believe we're in the middle of a revolution. Where that is, I can't put my finger on it, because sometimes we drag ourselves back, and I think the part of the problem in Irish football is others are kicking us and they're using and yeah, okay, I'll say it. I don't like saying it but I have to make it personal. It is, they're using the Delaney era to hold us back now, where you're saying no, checks and balances now, no problem putting them in place. And I think, they've changed the board and they've done certain things. So hold us to the highest standard in the world, no problem, but actually give us a hand to grow the game and help society.
Yeah, and treat us the same as everybody else.
Yeah,
that's the bit where you start looking at the greyhound industry and going, well, I'm not really sure that you're worth all the money you tell us you're worth. But anyway, we're definitely going to come back to that. One last thing about Cork. Sorry, they seem to be really struggling, and actually UCD have the bones of a team who are causing difficulty for sides on a regular basis.
Cork's a big fear for me in terms of the league. I think it's important that we have a strong Cork in the league, but they must stay there on the pitch and on marathon. They've since beaten Dundalk, I think they've lost 4 in a row, and UCD are one of them sides that they go through a 3 or 4 year cycle where they lose all the best players after 2 or 3 years, where they've all gone through college, they're free to leave, out you go, and the new bunch comes in. And this bunch, people would say it's a poor UCD side, etc. But they'll gradually pick up points, and it's important that Cork have just got new owners. It's so important to League of Ireland that we have a strong Cork, and I have a big fear where they're at. They need to go and spend in this window, and I think they will, but they got to get the recruitment right. Watch them against Bowls, and albeit the man sent off, so the game went against them. They don't look like a mid-table Premier Division side yet, so they need a hand. And
Colin Healy's not happy either, like with the decisions and stuff. Even Rory Keating not scoring in 6 games is a bit of a concern when that's your lead target man.
They've got Tunde Afolabi and Rory Keating up there, and he's got to maybe come up with a system that can get 2 of them into the team, because goals will win you games. The sending off really bothered him last night, but I think there was a decision just before that where they were through on goal and the referee blew up and brought it back for a free kick for them on the halfway line. But they go against you, but like, they were well beaten yesterday. Jordan Flores with another amazing goal. These goals go into full packed stadiums and they look even better. But Cork need to spend some money back Colin, but they also they've got a lot of players that just a little bit short, and they need to sign a couple to strengthen, because you need Cork in the Premier Division of League of Ireland.
One last question. We were talking a little bit earlier on about the Spurs Liverpool game. I know you watched that. Jurgen Klopp was called.
I just say, we 2 Man United fans here this morning hammering Jurgen Klopp like it was just the worst bit of radio I've heard in a long time. The two of them just gone on a personal attack,
He used to be, I think he used to be quite
Alex
enjoyable
Ferguson
for opposition fans.
Wasn't Alex Ferguson the most loyal, honest, good man who never
Fergie was too old. He was too old to run after full officials, though.
Not all his career.
And he done it in a different way. His words were, But I spoke during the week about Liverpool and sort of their recovery. It's fascinating, because I was thinking about it. We done a piece maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, with Owen about what made Liverpool great, and it was the midfield three. And it's funny, people are picking holes in their back four at the moment, but actually they've, like, Henderson or Fabinho or Wijnaldum used to press so high up the pitch that actually teams couldn't get out, and now there's just one simple pass breaking the lines. But Liverpool's forward line, I would say to you, is as good as anyone. The challenge they're having is that midfield is just too open, and it's shown flaws in their back four that always been there but was never tested, because you just couldn't get out against Liverpool and you couldn't break the lines with your passing.
I know there's a view that the whole team needs loads of surgery, but actually if they were just to spend all the money on the dynamism of a high quality midfielder, that might be a better way of spending their money than signing 5 players for 40 million and none of them actually bringing the level of energy to that midfield that they need.
Yeah, and I think you can overthink it. Like, you look at their back, the way their back three are playing at the moment, and they're too far apart. Kanate and Van Dijk is too far apart, and they're trying to come up with different systems. And I think they probably feel, as a coaching staff, this is an opportunity to try something. You've nothing to lose. Drop Trent in there, but again. And hey, what would I know? But they should have signed Jude Bellingham when we done that piece two years ago, 18 months ago. And that's when you go and you go boom. And that's what, to be fair to Ferguson, was brilliant. That when he felt something was coming off, he just went straight in and topped it up. And if that meant a big name coming out, but there is green shoots. But it was a fascinating game in the sense, and then you get Sky saying it was one of the great games and all this stuff, but actually it was low in quality for a long period of time. The Spurs got into it because Liverpool were really poor and just stepped off a little bit.
But everybody's talking about the hamstring injury as opposed to the fact that they were 3-0 up and nearly blew it.
And that's not good enough. And as I said to you, they'll have coaching staff who'll be showing them, like Kanate and Van Dijk are 40-50 yards apart to allow this new shape, and that's okay. A lot of teams play that back three when you have the ball, but that means Robertson has to become more central, and Van Dijk has to be right in the centre of the pitch, but they're too far apart. But hey, what would I know to be telling Jurgen Klopp anything? But the point is, they're set up wrong. They need 2 world-class midfielders of really high energy, because Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott are just below the level, and while they can play for Liverpool for a long period of time, it has to be with real strength in them.
And maybe they're squad players as well, who knows. Vinny, good stuff, thanks a million. We've Rovers Bows to look forward to later on in the week. We'll talk about that again in advance, but in the meantime, make sure you don't miss all the action in Rugby Daily today in your OTB podcast network, bringing you everything you need to know about rugby. It's all in partnership with Deliveroo. Deliveroo has some great bundles and deals. Open the app, make your choice, and watch your rider come to you. Deliveroo, food, we get it. Up next, Irish snooker player Fergal O'Brien in studio talking about the World Championships. First, Johnny and Dan talking Man City's dominance.
Nah, this doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose, yeah, like from state-funded domination of one sport to another, I suppose.
Nicely done.
Yeah,
not quite comparable.
No, how many Prestbury Cups have you won? You know, show me your Prestbury Cup medals. The whole Man City thing. Yeah, I mean, this has always been the case, though. Like, I mean, maybe that it's that they're on the verge, and I spoke about it here with Joe during the week. Like, maybe the fact they're on the verge of a treble, makes it even more pronounced that they might, achieve this historic thing. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, this is it's sort of careful what you wish for. I meant this point around the time of the Premier League investigation. Man City at various times, some of the other clubs that are being dominated by them have sort of run with them at times, in Super League debates, looking for an increased share, overseas rights. Like, Man City were accepted to the top table. They've been a useful ally at times, but they just have a bottomless reserve. And if they're struggling, they can again, they can find a new sponsor, of an independent company in UAE, whatever, and they'll take off again. I still like watching them play football.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the hypocrisy that probably exists within us all. They are like I've always found them a good side to watch. But I mean, what do people want to happen? Is it the Saudi-funded Newcastle? Would that be the rivalry that the modern Premier League deserves?
Modern world,
and then maybe Qatar, Manchester United.
All right, it's 8:55 this morning. I'm delighted to say Fergal O'Brien joins us in studio to look back on the World Championships. Fergal, all in all, I suppose when you have a first-time winner like this, it's hard to know whether or not this is like we're witnessing a one-time winner or somebody who's going to go on and have a great career. But notwithstanding that, it seems like it was a pretty good World Championships all told, with some controversy, some stereotypical Ronnie brilliance, him collapsing in the way he did. Not a bad 2 weeks all told.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bit of everything. And even the protest, whatever, even that was good publicity, for snooker, because obviously sometimes it struggles a bit, to get the publicity and maybe recognition it deserves, especially over the 17 days, because it can be a bit of a drag. But
yeah,
it seemed to be every couple of days there seemed to be something going on. There was a couple of 147s, comebacks, the young Chinese player as well. So it was a bit of everything.
What's your instinct about where the game is in terms of its popularity at the moment?
I definitely think Luca helps. I suppose if you're a young player, if you look on the telly and maybe, we love Higgins and Ronnie and Mark Williams, but if you're a young kid looking at them, they look ancient, and then maybe goes to the studio. Again, Davis and Parrott, they're in their 60s or so, so whilst we love them with great respect, as a kid probably is not attractive. Whereas obviously now Luca's an old looking 28, to be fair. But
he is, isn't he?
Is that all he is?
Yeah.
But his style of play was so attacking and quick. Who wouldn't want to play like him as well? So I think that's good.
Yeah.
Then I think pre-COVID the game was doing really, really well, because obviously there was so many tournaments in China. Prize money was going up. It was good. Since then, it's hit a bit of a wall. The tournaments in China are going to start back up. If COVID hadn't happened and was on the same trajectory, we'd be going very well, but definitely hit the wall a piece.
Yeah, it's all set up for Netflix style. Everybody wants one. But snooker, I think, probably has just enough characters at the moment to justify it.
Yeah, but I think O'Sullivan did a documentary last year. I think that's due out. I think
very soon.
Is it Netflix? Is it?
Yeah. So
that's
maybe that'll be the start of it.
Should be decent, but like as you say, when you have a player of the style of Luca Brissell, and you could hear Stephen Hendry getting excited on commentary last night. Like, he obviously loves that type of play, but he's just one of these. And you hear about him partying and during the tournament and staying up late in the hotel bar. You just don't get that now with players in the modern day. So I think people nearly lean into someone like Luca Brissell.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way it goes on.
Yeah, it's old school. But even for myself, even before he played, to start, and you heard he'd only done 15 minutes practice, and then whatever about that. So you said maybe it might work if he's fresh, and then in between matches, then he's gone back to bed. You know what I mean? I was kind of thinking, how many years have I wasted playing sober? You know?
Yeah, no.
What chance have you gotten bed early and preparing? You know what I mean? So, but maybe like that's the thing. It worked for him. So again, probably for old school, you're but like no, you have to do you do certain things to get the certain result. Where it just doesn't. Ultimately, the matches are won and lost when you're playing. He was obviously very fresh when he played, looking forward to it, and probably switch because I know myself. Not so much even the playing, but the couple of days in between matches can be so draining because you're trying to do the right thing. You're in your room and we have a lot of time to think. Whereas if you're there with a few friends and totally switch off, you ideally, but like as soon as you walk in the crucible doors, you're like right snooker, and then as soon as you go, switch off. Or so you probably have a balance. I don't know whether you can get about that all the time, but in a one-off certainly worked.
It's funny, like I was at the Crucible last week for a few days, and even in backstage I bumped briefly into Luca, and I was struck by how small his entourage was. It was just his mate, like literally just his friend. And I remember hearing that he doesn't have a sports psychologist, which I'd imagine in an individual sport like snooker is extremely rare. Like I'd have said of the top 16, 32 players, surely there can't be many that don't lean into the sports psychology a little bit at least.
No, it's more the other way. It's more still
really?
quite rare that you have. You obviously have coaches. Like even my own coach, we say Chris Henry, obviously deals in the mental side as well. But Mark Allen has a sports psychologist, but just people that have just a sports psychologist, a lot of them still wouldn't have coaches. It's only the last maybe 10 years that the coaches has kind of become a thing. So snooker was always kind of a little bit behind that. I remember even like as a kid, like if somebody had a coach, I remember living like, oh, look at your man, he has a coach there. They're really pleased if he got beaten, you know what I mean? So snooker has slowly but surely progressed, and that's going to come, and that's you can see now. And again, O'Sullivan was the standard bearer with the fitness, how fit he is, with his diet. So that more and more is becoming a thing.
You'd think they'd be looking though at the younger players would be looking at Ronnie and Steve Peters and the work he's done with Peters and gone, right, well, Ronnie's clearly successful, Steve Peters has clearly helped him win a number of those world titles, so you'd think they'd all be heading that direction then. I'm surprised to hear that there's not more.
Yeah, no, it is getting there, but it has been slow, and as I said, over the years it was known it's slowly but surely coming in or being accepted or starting to get feared as in, he is working with a coach, but I said it is slow progress with that.
And are the coaches really just about enhancing the quality of the practice as opposed to really significantly changing technique?
I suppose the better you are, it's less to do with technique because you can generally play. If a lot of the time if you make changes, you're probably just really finding a different way to play rather than maybe being any better. But the transfer you're looking for is that to play like you do in practice in matches. That's ideally what you want, because again, you look at everybody in practice. We all look $1 million and think like, how does he ever miss? How does he ever lose?
Yeah.
But then when you get out to play, then your mind, you just tend to get in your own way, or I certainly found that myself. You're trying to maybe control things, or trying to over trying was certainly something for me. So
because you're coaching now, right?
Yeah, the last year or so.
That's a really interesting transition to be making. Yeah. And now when you're coaching, do you think, geez, I really wish I'd had somebody helping me do the things that I'm doing for other people now? Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Because it wasn't basically when I started playing, if your coach or somebody was basically whoever's the best player in your club, you got a little bit of advice from that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
There was nothing really. It was only maybe the 80s. A guy called Frank Callan. He coached Davis in the 80s, Hendry in the 90s.
Right.
Good pedigree there. Yeah. And I did in the early 2000s. I did start working with him, and I did kind of change my cue action because I felt I could get better or whatever. So that by the stuff I learned as a player has in trying to improve as a player, gone into the coaching has helped. But yeah, you're even telling people stuff and just rattling it off and going, that's good stuff, and you're a bit like, 30 years ago or 30 years ago I wasn't thinking it, or I'm telling them stuff, but it's as much because I didn't do it myself.
Yeah.
Well, consistently as I would have liked.
That's the benefit of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I presume snooker players get the yips.
Yeah, that can happen. I've known players. Patsy Fagan certainly had that. That's what done his career with the rest. Actually, he just had it with the rest.
Right.
But it's rare enough, but yeah, it has happened.
What's that then?
You're full of positives, aren't you?
Well, you get the value of the coaching then, because like if that can happen in a sport, then you need to work to prevent it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and there can be players who can be overcoached. It's probably a personality thing, because you look at Luca Brissell, he seems to just get down in the shot so quickly. He of course thinks about it, but completely the polar opposite of Mark Selby in that he gets down in the shot and he's just playing. He's doing as little thinking perhaps as is possible.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very decisive, because that's again, that's something that I kind of struggled a bit with. But generally, 99 times out of 100, when you first come to the table, the shot you first see is the shot to play. It's rare that changes. Again, sometimes you're more important to be decisive rather than correct. Whereas Selby, to be fair, and actually I thought Mark Allen has kind of slipped into that little piece, because he's generally very quick. Attacking player, he's nearly kind of second guessing himself. I don't think it's been to his advantage. He's trying to be looking for what you would say the correct shot.
Yeah.
But, it's very.
He got dragged into Selby's game a bit, Alan. I felt in the semi-final that slow, 29-30 second average shot time. Whereas Purcell just. Well, having said that, when it got back to 16-15 to Purcell last night, you probably felt that Selby was going to go on and win.
Yeah, it's amazing. With Selby, he's 16-10 down. Normally, you'd nearly be knocking the telly off like it's over. With Selby, you still think there's every chance here. And again, as a player, probably Purcell, his reputation, you need actually probably without realising wait for him to come back. So Selby's thinking about coming back, and so is Purcell. But no, it was great. I thought with Mark Allen, as I said, the style of play, I think Mark himself was happy enough to go toe to toe, have longer frames. It wouldn't necessarily suit Mark Allen, I don't think, as much as Selby. But also, Luca Purcell, he's quicker. But also, Mark Allen would play like a thin safety and keep the pack together, whereas Luca Purcell first chance would play thick safety. So that then forces Selby either to go for one, or Selby's next shot is harder, because his safety has to be better if potentially Purcell can pot 5 or 6 reds, whereas if it's a tight pack. And again, what might be a shot long pot the players might refuse or mightn't get, Luca's going to go for, and if he's playing well, get a high percentage. So it puts a greater pressure on your own game,
I think Roy Keane was there. Was at the Crucible at the weekend. Or he was certainly there on Sunday night. So he got the session in with the Selby maximum break, which wasn't a bad one. To get to. But
could you imagine if there was the Allen and Selby semi, he'd be giving the view. So.
Jesus, he'd probably say Selby was just doing his job for the 147. But I mean, how do you put that achievement into context? It's the first ever time there's been a maximum break in a world final, which is very, very impressive, and it's a first 147 at the Crucible for Selby generally. So maybe put that into context for us. That's quite an achievement. Yeah, it's brilliant. It really is. I said in the final with the pressure that's there and the crowd, and to be fair, his cue ball control was so good. It was only just he never looked like missing. You know what I mean? Because even when you thought, okay, when he maybe gets down to the colours, the pressure might kick in. And then even when he's pot the pink and he's going, messing with his tongue and he's stuck on the black. You know what I mean? Whereas you're still like, make sure you pot the black. Yeah. You look pretty foolish if you miss the black. But no, it's fantastic to keep, because from early your mind just can get ahead of yourself. Even in practice, sometimes you could be, you're on 64 and you start getting a little bit ahead of yourself, which can slow you down and tighten up. But it's fantastic.
It's a bit wild that Purcell wins, having won the first round 10-9, and then having been so far behind Ronnie, who you just think is like going to cruise to this, and then going to, ultimately the winner took that. Is that just a sign that this guy has something very unique, and we could see him win multiple, or? Is that this is his week, he should really enjoy this because this is never going to happen again? Lightning struck multiple times across the course of the 2 weeks. Yeah, no, I don't think it's that. If it put a number, I'd say he could maybe win 2 or 3. Right. I don't think he's 7 or 8. But I mean, since he was 13, 14, we've all heard about him. Yeah. Where there's this kid in Belgium, and I think players have begun. Hendry might be going over to exhibitions and he was hammering them. And then at 17, he made his first time at the Crucible. So it's more being delayed. Right. You more at 17 thought, could he be the youngest ever world champion? You'd say it was the maturing, except it didn't feel that way from the stories he was telling us, Yeah, exactly. But look, real nice guy, real quiet guy. But again, always stayed in the general consensus, the fact that he stayed in Belgium, because again, even like myself and Ken and others, you had to go to England, you had to be playing the players to improve, to raise the standard. He's always stayed on his own, and even when he was at home, it wasn't like he was even practicing with other players, so it was a lot of solo work. Yeah. And generally, if you do too much solo work, it doesn't kind of work. So but again, it's worked for him, It's like the tap open, because he's been playing at the Crucible for 11 years now. Yeah, never won a game. And had never won a game, always first round exit. So, and it was, as he mentioned last night afterwards, like Ricky Walden, 10-9 first round, could have easily lost that match in the decider, but it's like the tap opened. Yeah, it's unbelievable. When he won the first, there was the shades of it. I don't know, if you're old enough, the Joe Johnson. He had that those couple of weeks just flying under no pressure. Of course, beat Steve Davis in the final. And we haven't had a kind of a Joe Johnson winner, maybe Sean Murphy a little piece in 2005. So one was kind of due, but I mean, no disrespect to Joe Johnson because he won the Worlds, but Luke is a far better player than
then it's not quite a case of that was his week and good night. No, he's
so we should
super talented, and again he's still at 28. So
should mention before we finish, Fergal's been inducted into the Irish Snooker Hall of Fame in
congratulations
recent days as well.
Yeah, Sunday I was quite proud of myself for that.
Quite an achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I was pleased actually, because there was a ceremony and like my family came, whatever, wife and mum and dad, and Angus McAnally was he's involved with the Snooker Billiards Association. So I was up there, he asked me a few questions. I was delighted because I said if I'd have started speaking I'd probably still be crying. So I was delighted, just kind of distracted me, but no, it really was. It was a lovely ceremony, the kind of picture on the wall, like Ken got inducted last year. So no, it really was chuffed with that, to be fair.
Great. Well, we wish you the very best with the coaching and everything else that's coming as well. Fergal, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks for Fergal.
Fergal O'Brien giving some thoughts on the World Snooker Finals there. Some highlights on the OTB Podcast Network for you to watch, or to listen to rather. The football pod, our GA manager reaction from both hurling and football at the weekend, and Keith Tracy speaking in the aftermath of Spurs doing Spurs things. You can follow OTB across our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for whatever you want there. After the ads, Sarah Donovan on the weekends hurling. Back after these.
You're listening
to OTB AM.
He's got O'Shea in behind, and is this the clincher? Oh, you bet it is. It's a goal for Arsenal, and Merson has scored it.
It's the Arsenal legend Paul Merson and UEFA Champions League winners John O'Shea and Wes Brown, and they are coming to Dublin.
Gets across it, Brown!
Myself and Joe are going to be hosting a very special UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat. It's on May 3rd in the Mansion House in Dublin. It is going to be a cracking night. It's an exclusive off-air event. So if you want to be there, get on to offtheball.com/events. Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, loads of live comments pouring through on youtube.com/offtheball. Shane says, I don't condone what Klopp did. He should be in the stands for a couple of games. Not a good image for kids. Michael says, Leinster's performance is really impressive. The mindset seems there to win this year. Shifty lads, should they release the recording to prove Klopp was lying, in your opinions, lads? This audio recording and stuff, look, it seems to be a little bit of a storm in a teacup, but Klopp is undermining the officials. He's attacking them. Can't be doing that either.
It's all a game. It all feels very planned from when Klopp does it, doesn't it? Like even the run down the sideline was like, well, he's taking his moment. He's not doing a Jose Mourinho where he's running down celebrating with the Porto fans and players. He's running directly towards the official, which is my issue. People in the comments are giving out saying, oh, United fans, typical, giving out about Jurgen Klopp, but that's not the case.
Well, it is.
Well, I mean,
and it also is.
I wouldn't like to see Eric Ten Hag running towards an official. I don't think it would be a good look for any manager in the Premier League, because as some people have pointed out,
Roy Keane shaved head on David Ellery with all the rest of the class of '92 behind him. United fans like, yeah, you go, you're all amazing. This is all just tribal bollocks. No,
I don't think so. You can't run towards an official in any sport.
Well, let's wait and see when Ten Hag is fighting for titles.
Possibly,
or his job.
What's Klopp fighting for at the moment?
He's fighting for the ability to sign good players in the summer.
Potentially.
Brian Dillon says, lads, not sport related. I had Dadcast in my back pocket for years, just in case one day I needed it. I now have a 7-week-old, so I'm officially allowed to listen to a great show, lads. I would hasten to add that many people listen to Dadcast without having kids, and you may enjoy it more than those who do. Edward Freeman says, paranoid and under pressure manager blames VAT. I don't know, VAR I presume it is.
Yeah, the tax is bad as well, though. I'm sure.
Look, all the managers are all blaming the referees at various stages. Where were the no GA on Sky crew on Saturday? Watching Sonic the Hedgehog on RTE1 is where a ridiculous decision not to have those games covered. Edward Freeman says there's enough GA games on every weekend for RTE to show one on a Saturday and one on a Sunday. GA games shouldn't be pay-per-view. There definitely seems to be less anger about the game on Saturday not being on terrestrial television than there would have been if it was on Sky. Or was there? I don't know. I haven't seen the tweets about my old father who was unable to watch this game because he didn't have access to it. That trope seems to have died a death. Has it?
People just need to catch up with the technology, basically. And even the Derry Monaghan match. Like, it wasn't on BBC, it wasn't on RTE, it was only on the GA Go, 12 quid to pay for it. I'm sure the service is brilliant, but at the same time, it's just... The one repercussion it has is it increases the atmosphere. There was an unbelievable atmosphere. There was a moment in the first half of that Derry Monaghan match where Rory Gallagher is berating the officials, and the officials come over, give him a yellow card. Loud cheer from the Monaghan fans in the stand when that happens. I think there was a little bit of banter back and forth between Derry and Monaghan fans, probably only added to by the fact that the game wasn't on TV and so many people were there. Good weather in Oma as well. So I see people's argument that not everyone has the luxury of being able to attend these matches, but it would be nice to have the option of watching them, wouldn't it? Without paying for it, I guess, directly.
Maybe we'll come back to that, because it is time for us to turn our attention to the weekend's hurling. Sarah Donovan is with us. Sarah, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you, lads? Big smiley head here in Cork. Delighted with the weekend.
Yeah, it couldn't have worked out much better for Cork. Maybe we'll start with Cork. It's the most recent. Sad Davy is not a regular character that we see outside of the Late Late Show appearances sometimes, but he was pretty sad in the aftermath of the game.
Plays a great sad Davy, doesn't he? Very, very sad. Very, very disconsolate, upset, and actually reading his comments afterwards, I agreed with him in some aspects. They didn't turn up, they didn't have any energy, and I don't know, can I blame Davy specifically for not having any energy? But I can blame the tactics. And I think, first off, Darragh Fitzgibbon, no one expected him to come into the setup the way that he did. He absolutely ruled the roost for the first 10 minutes for Cork, and possibly because we hadn't seen him in the league, I don't know if Davy had set up for him. And that's the first thing that I'm going to say. I'm going to give him one, I suppose, non-negative for what Waterford threw out on Sunday.
Turns out, Sarah, as well, being over the age of 30, this gives me a lot of confidence, by the way, heading into my, as I'm in my 30th year. But Cahalane, Seamus Hornady, Conor Lahan, Patrick Horgan, all of them excellent. Horgan in particular contributing, I think it was 13 points, so not bad.
Yeah, but I suppose I opened the Examiner on Saturday morning, lads, and that's kind of a ritual in Cork, the weekend of a championship match, and Enda McAvoy, damning headline, brand new championship, same old faces. And I was going, God, that's a lot of pressure on the lads coming into this game. But I think Pat Ryan really worked it well, because he had all the energy in the middle of the field with the likes of Darragh Fitz, Brian Roach, who got player of the match. Shane Barrett had moved out the field, Luke Meade had moved out the field. And he kept Horgan, Lehan, Harnedy close to goal between the 45 and the end line. And that's where they did all the damage. So there's a place for everyone in this team. And it was a lovely mix of energy and, I suppose, experience in that Cork team on Sunday.
Roach and Fitzgibbon in the middle of the park in particular were excellent, Sarah. Now, Roach in his full debut as well probably deservedly gets man of the match. Really good pairing that has been found there.
Well, actually, it was kind of a mix, because it was Darragh Fitz was kind of playing centre forward. Luke Meade was pulled out as a third kind of midfielder, and I suppose the three of them made a massive difference there in that midfield, and Waterford couldn't get a run on them at all. But what was interesting was the space that Cork managed to find themselves in, and because the energetic players were making so much space, then the likes of Horgan and Lehan were able to ghost into those, I suppose, pockets and tip off the scores.
Were you surprised that Davy took so long to make the changes? We were talking before the show today about Austin Gleeson in particular. He took his time.
It's been a funny one all year, because he's been bringing Austin Gleeson into games to kind of change games, and I'm saying if he's well enough to change a game, then he should be well enough to start. I don't know what the fixation is with bringing him into games. It's hard as a player to come into a game and try and make a change, and certainly when you're 6, 7, 8 points down to try and get a foothold. But at half time he whipped off Mikey Kiley, he whipped off Tom Barron, players straight in. But I suppose they had that purple patch after half time where they scored 3 points. And look, it wasn't all gloss for Cork. They lived on their nerves. Some great saves from Patrick Collins. One very fortuitous save from Damien Catalan off the back of his helmet from a Stephen Bennett shot. Waterford, if they had got the goals when they were pushing for them, maybe they would have had a canter in the last 10 minutes. But I don't know, disappointment outright, because the game never took off.
That's exactly what Cork wanted, though, right? Keep the team at arm's length. It's a brilliant start to the championship for them, because there's plenty for them to work on, and maybe Waterford are gone at this point, and so therefore it's kind of 50-50 at worst that they're going to be in the All-Ireland series. Sometimes it's really bad starting late after everybody else, but sometimes it's really great starting late after everybody else. Well,
if you look at, I suppose, how much energy they expended as a unit, as a group, they didn't expend as much energy as Waterford did the week before against Limerick, or Clare did against Tip. So now they're going into next Saturday night, 6 days later, not as bruised as every other team. The only issue with Cork is that they're low on defenders. So they only had 2 defenders in their subs last Sunday, in Tim O'Mahony and Cormac O'Brien. And the lads who I suppose we would have expected to see around the team, who'd been kind of showing up in the league, are injured and won't be back for a while. So if something happened to Cork in the way that it happened to Sean Finn, say, Cork don't have the same firepower right now in their defence. And they will be tested by Tip on Saturday. And I am nervous about that because Tip are goal hungry, scored 5 against Clare. And I'd say they'd be excited about taking on that Cork defence on Saturday night.
What do you say about Waterford, Sarah? Because you'd have to say it's concerning. I think someone had pointed out they haven't scored a goal in 105 minutes of Championship hurling. It's 11 defeats and 13 in those round-robin matches as well. So when you look at the strength in depth in their squad on paper, all of these stats and facts are surprising.
Well, what let them down last week against Limerick was their accuracy, their shooting. Late on they had chances to win the game and they didn't take them. And again, against Cork, they had 3-4 chances for goal and they just weren't accurate enough. They weren't clinical enough. So to that point, I spoke in the league and I was quite critical of Waterford and Davy in the league, saying, God, they're trying mad things and they're going to try and marry so many things. I don't know if they're going to be ready for Championship. And with the talent that you're talking about, Shane, maybe it needed just for them to step back and focus on the basics in the 6 or 8 weeks leading into the Championship, rather than try all of these mad different puck-out strategies. And because ultimately they were in games, they just couldn't actually finish them off.
And yet they were so close to knocking Limerick over, and it turns out Limerick were right there for the taking. The softening up that John Kiley spoke about in the aftermath of that game, has it worked? Were they somehow softened up by all the talk of 6 in a row before they've done the 4?
Well, you know what, I physicality, the intensity, the attitude, there's too many cameras on this Limerick team in the league is what it looks like, because they've felt under massive pressure in the way that they've been, I suppose, taking teams on, right? Did anyone feel like on Saturday night that Limerick were actually looking for protection from the referee and not Clare? Because it felt to me like every time Kyle Hayes came out with the ball, he was pleading with the referee, with Colm Lyons, for a bit of support or safety, because he was getting mauled by Clare. And basically what Clare did to Limerick was pushed them out, drove at them, hounded them, delayed them, wouldn't let them out. Great stat from Ray Boyne. I've worked with Ray Boyne a couple of years ago with Dublin, and he's fascinated with the tackle, hook, block stats in matches. And we used to always be trying to hit 90 tackles, hooks, blocks in a game. You'd get to 70 and you'd be absolutely bet, right? That's the energy that was expended to try and get to those stats. And he had a stat up Saturday night. Clare 113 tackles, hooks, blocks. Limerick 102 tackles, hooks, blocks. So as energetic and intense as Limerick were, Clare just steamrolled them.
And in the end, it's only a point, right? So, that's the sign of a really great team not playing very well. Everybody not fit. Cian Lynch goes off at half time. Hegarty, what's going on? We're not sure. So we'll see.
He's the most off colour. I agree, Ger. Hegarty is definitely the most off colour. And there was a stage on Saturday night where he lost the ball. It pans out and he's standing with his hands on his hips. And he doesn't make any effort to run back. And I went, oh God, this game is in the melting pot and you've tuned out. Whereas Tom Morrissey, Will O'Donoghue, absolutely outrageous 70 minutes from both of them. They were absolutely impeccable. So I would say this Limerick team learnt a lot about themselves on Saturday night. And I'd be afraid. I would. I think they've got 3 weeks now. Caroline Curd is always talked about as, a real big, important part of this team. And she's got 3 weeks to work on, I suppose, the confidence that they've possibly lost from this defeat.
I'd be along similar lines. Even Sarah, when John Kiley says afterwards it's a very downbeat dressing room in there, I'm just thinking of those Limerick lads in there. All they need is a little bit of fire in their bellies and an excuse to push on, because people are saying, this result is going to save the summer. All of a sudden Limerick maybe are fallible, but no.
I agree. I think that the way he said it hurts like it did before, and he's referring to that, I suppose, chasm of time where Limerick weren't winning All Irelands, and it just took one result for that Limerick team to feel absolutely deflated. So I suppose the only other issue here is the likes of Sean Finn, the likes of Cian Lynch, and we saw how integral Cian Lynch was in the semi-final of the league and the final of the league, and how he opened up the spaces for Aaron Gillan and Shamie Flanagan. The last 2 games he's really struggled because, as we said, if you push up on him, he doesn't have the time to make the space for the lads inside, and that has resulted in them not being able to get scores from play. Like, their scores from play has gone way down in the last 2 games, and that's, I suppose, something that could be an issue if Cian Lynch was to stay out of the game for 2-3 games with this hamstring injury.
The analysis over the last number of years has been that you've got to basically score 30 points if you're going to beat them, but that's not the case anymore. So I'm not convinced. I actually thought the Waterford game was the perfect thing for them, in that they've had a bad performance. They've seen tactically what teams are going to try and do to them, and they're going to learn from that and emerge last week, and they didn't emerge. That's the thing. So I actually, now I'm putting this narrative retrospectively going, Kylie's pissed off because he feels like something has slipped. He's seen it. Waterford, who it turns out aren't very good, put them to the pin of their collar. Clare, let them back into the game with a consolation goal in the last second, which took a little bit of the gloss off the scoreline. But now they're up against it. I would say anybody who's left, I would say Galway, Kilkenny, Cork, Tip, Clare will fancy a chance against Limerick in Croker, going, we're going to be the ones that stop you.
Clare showed a lot of, I suppose, their intensity in beating them the last night, right? There was certain challenges in the game from Clare's point of view that I felt were on the edge, and I know lads love being on the edge and talking about those challenges, but Peter Duggan's challenges on the full back line coming out, Barry Nash being pinned into the corner, Kyle Hayes being dragged down half rugby style at times. I don't know if other referees are going to allow other teams to be that intense and to be that impactful, we'll say. Kylie talked afterwards about the forwards having a lot of contact on. I don't know, did you pick that up in the post-match interview? And what he meant was they were being pulled and dragged. And I think as the season progresses, referees are going to be very wide to all of the pulling and the dragging that's going on, and they'll start to have to bring in back those frees again and, I suppose, make it a little cleaner, because it wasn't clean on Saturday night. It was brilliant, but it was hellfire.
I'll be interested to see, right, because I do have this kind of sense that hurling referees are like the biggest alpha dogs in the GAA world, who don't give a shit. They don't care. You could be bleeding. They could be bleeding themselves from a accidental belt of Tommy Walsh's hurl, and they'll be like, yeah, grand, I don't care, let's go. So I actually think that they're going, yeah, well, you're a Limerick, you're 3 times all out winners, he's pulling you, stop whining. That's what I think is going to happen to that. So it's interesting Kylie didn't call it out in a, what's going on with this. It's you have to subtly tell the referees that maybe they're not doing their job properly, and they're such a crowded shower that they'll be like, well, screw you, John Kylie.
I have to agree with John Kylie after the game, in the sense that they were looking for protection. They were literally pleading with Colm Lyons to say, look, this isn't what's happening here. And what Clare did to them what they've been doing to teams for the last 17 games, all right? And I just don't know if this is going to continue through the All-Ireland stages, if we're going to have such fire and brimstone, or referees are going to allow it. That's my thing here. Okay. It was punishing. It was punishing.
Well, they have been sometimes prone to that themselves, so maybe it'll balance itself out as we get deeper into the championship. Obviously, we expect both these teams to still be there. We don't expect suddenly Limerick to go into a tailspin, do we?
Well, we spoke before about it being one of Cork, Clare, Tip and Limerick will not progress, and that's really disappointing, because right now those 4 teams are poised to do serious damage and could be All-Ireland contenders. So
yeah, I mean, it's a nonsense. It is an absolute nonsense that the championship is set up this way. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And look, I think I don't know how they're going to fix it, because on the other side you've Galway and Kilkenny were able to, taper down in front of 13,000 people and both be happy enough with the draw.
Yeah,
and there's killings in the Munster Championship.
We could go back to straight knockout in Munster and Leinster, and then have round robin series after, where the best 6 teams or the best 8 teams are involved. There's an easy fix for this if they want it. It's just that maybe they don't want it. So and it'll get worse and worse as the Cork revolution continues with Ben O'Connor midweek. The the two Bens O'Connors both being super impressive?
Yeah, look, I was actually, when that Old Faces tagline was in the headlines on Saturday morning in the Examiner, I was like, oh God, are Cork not being revolutionary enough, and should we be seeing more of these young guys? But I suppose when you're looking at Brian Roach, 21 years of age, wins player of the match, and you're looking at players like Kieran Joyce coming through, Padraig Power came on for Cork again the last day, we probably have a couple of years of just patience in Cork to allow those young lads to develop and be as big as, put on that bulk, that 10, 15 kgs that they need to play.
And you're a notoriously patient lot, aren't you?
What are we? How many years are we without it now? 2005. Yeah. Will we get to 20-year anniversary? Will that be our lot? I don't know. I just feel like the Limerick setup still hasn't used Shane O'Brien, or they still haven't used Adam English. There's a couple of players there that did very well in the league for Limerick that haven't been seen yet. From Cork's point of view, Cork are relying still on the older players, and is that because the younger players just aren't ready yet? Is that what it is? And are we very lucky to have the likes of Conor Lehan, Seamus Harnedy and Patrick Horgan still willing to put it in?
Yeah.
Past 34. But then John Conlon, what a stalwart performance again yesterday. So they're doing it in every county. And I suppose until Cork are ready to hand over the mantle to the younger guys, then we have what we have. And they've done enough against Waterford. As I said, their forwards, outstanding. Defensively, Cork will be under pressure on Saturday night against Tip and don't have, I suppose, the Richie Englishes to come in or the Mike Caseys to come in to do the job, where Limerick have had the same issues with injuries.
We tend, Sarah, to talk a lot about venues and locations picked for matches. Joe Canning was astounded, speaking at the weekend, about Dublin Wexford this coming Saturday at 5 o'clock being fixed for Croke Park. I think he was making the point that as an away player you hated going to Parnell Park, the atmosphere, the raucousness of it. Are you surprised that the Dubs wouldn't want a game of such magnitude being played in the confines of Parnell Park?
Yeah, so we've always played our home games in Parnell Park with Dublin over the years, and big teams came to Parnell Park to play us in the Camogie side, and we'd Cork in Parnell Park, we'd Kilkenny in Parnell Park, and we were able to, I suppose, give them, we were able to challenge them in those games because it felt like it was our, it's hard to explain, but it was like your place that it was impenetrable, right? And there was a real confidence in that. Now, I was in Croke Park last year during the Walsh Cup, and Wexford played Dublin. And February game, Dublin absolutely destroyed Wexford. It was a cricket score. And I don't know, is it that's possibly playing on Dublin's minds, and that they did really well in that space then against Wexford, and they cut them open because of their pace and because of the way they were able to spray the ball. They have had success in Croke Park, and they have won Leinster title in Croke Park. It's possibly that they don't see it as a disadvantage and that they actually enjoy playing there.
And maybe they feel like if they're going to go deep at any point, they're going to have to get used to that and start to lean on the same advantage that the footballers have, which is obviously paying dividends for them and has done over the last 20 years. A quick word about the Galway-Kilkenny game. They're definitely both genuine All-Ireland contenders. For Galway to come back the way they did in that second half, the long-range point-taking that they were doing before the final equaliser even, that was Limerick-esque.
Yeah, and you're looking at that physicality and intensity, and be able to bring the ball to ground, win it, break up the line, and as you said, strike the ball 50-60 yards and be accurate, because there's been a bit of that over the last while in teams suffering because they haven't been accurate enough. But my, I suppose, thought from the game was, does Henry Shefflin take off Conor Whelan and bring on a championship debutant on the 69th minute if it's knockout? He doesn't. He has the luxury in that game, knowing that they are absolutely going to progress out of the Leinster Championship into the All-Ireland Series, and he's able to bring on Declan McLaughlin on the 69th minute. It's a completely different championship. It's poles apart, and they're very lucky that they're able to experiment like that, because now Declan McLaughlin has that in his armour for the next day out. He's, he knows that he's done that in the highest pressure moment.
Conor Whelan's been taken off, so that's a rocket under him in training as well. So
absolutely, and they did the same with like Liam Collins was brought on 65 minutes, and I've been very impressed with him all through the league. Shefflin has been brilliant in giving those players exposure during the league, and was able to give them that exposure on Sunday because it was a knockout.
You'd probably be
really lucky.
You'd be optimistic as if you were a Galway supporter, Sarah, considering that third quarter they looked like they were going to ship a serious bit of damage in that second half, and at one point I think Kilkenny were maybe 5 points ahead. So the fact that Galway could come back 6 even,
they went 6 ahead, and look, you know, when you've got the likes of TJ Reid and Mossy Keown firing, obviously Mossy came on at half time, and like interestingly from Derek Ling's point of view, it didn't look like he played his starting team or his best 15, I would say. I think he mixed it up, and he was giving lads a chance and giving other lads kind of game time. So I think both teams were shadow boxing in that one on Sunday. And I suppose from Galway's point of view and from Henry Shefflin's point of view, it was important not to leave Nolan Park, you know, without a point.
We'll leave it there. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Sarah Donovan giving us her thoughts there on the weekend's hurling. It is 9:34. Couple of quick comments for you. Shane says Clare may have beaten Limerick in a round robin game. Wait until Clare get to the serious end of the season. They're too soft. I didn't see any softness on display.
Nah,
I mean,
that's certainly not an accusation you can make with too much confidence.
I don't think you can say. I mean, the last year's semi-final against that performance against Kilkenny will hang over them until they win that style of game, or until after a letdown. Like, I mean, they obviously did come back from the Munster final defeat last year to get back to the semi-final. So anyway, Ronan Pine is complaining, did Sarah not see the free count from Clare Limerick on Saturday night? Column lines did not remotely give Clare any special favours. The opposite was the case, if anything. Free count doesn't automatically reflect, you know, you don't get called for 2/3 of the stuff that you're doing. The Munster Championship is hell for leather. Teams come out battered, says Shane. Meanwhile, the Leinster Championship is a series of challenge games. It's not a very even championship. It isn't. It isn't. And you know, if Kilkenny or Galway are to win it this year, I'll be interested to see what the hierarchy in Munster thinks about what the right thing to do is, because obviously the Munster Championship is so amazing and generates loads of finances for the Munster Council. And so are they going to say, oh, we'll have fewer games and we'll make the pot more evenly spread? They probably aren't.
No.
Should the decision be a money decision? Should it?
I often wonder in 5-10 years will we be looking back at the hurling and football championships of today going, Jesus, remember we did that? Remember how ridiculous that was in both Gaelic and hurling, I think. Now we're going to have a lot of matches in Gaelic football this summer. We'll see how it goes. Will we enjoy it? Probably, but is it the right answer? Probably not. But yeah, there's answers there that certainly won't be, I guess, fixed in the next 2 or 3 years.
Flying Hellfish 99 says Formula 1 in the red. The race in Baku was a procession. Red Bull are so dominant. I'll sell you my tickets to Silverstone, Shane.
I'll take them off you for sure. Silverstone's on my list, the bucket list. Yeah, Perez won in Baku. It's always a street race. It's a bit of excitement, but yeah, I think the Red Bull dominance at the moment is this. Formula 1 has the Dublin problem, where Dublin were winning all those All-Irelands. It's a little bit boring at the moment.
Shane and Colm, like, no issue with Fergie, the biggest bully in football history, banning the BBC for catching his nepotism. But sure, Liverpool manager celebrating a goal. Tut tut, says Peter M.
I never said he wasn't a bully either. Ferguson was a bully the same way. And if Ferguson did what Klopp did, I'd give out about it as well.
There's a lot of whataboutery from those guys there about you never said this about Ferguson. But they have actually said some stuff about Ferguson in the past too, but you haven't listened to every single second about what they've ever had. When they're criticising Klopp, should they say, oh, by the way, I'm going to go back historically and relitigate the various instances? I'm just winding them up because it does seem a little bit tribalist this morning. But anyway, the GA is suffering from a rural-urban divide, which is rarely discussed. Dublin's success can be attributed to increased urbanisation of Ireland's population. Yeah, but the town clubs should be getting better in all of the other counties as well, and that should have an impact. That's a long-standing sociological survey that we need to do on that before we get to the answer. The Dubs don't care what the media says. Ger, didn't they bring back Cluxton recently without telling you, says Joe O'Sullivan. Not quite sure what that's in reference to. And JP Wright, voice actor, says brave performance from Kildare, who deserved to compete for Sam. Fun fact, Kildare were first winners of Sam and have won more All-Ireland titles than Mayo and Monaghan combined. And
Monaghan have never won the All-Ireland, so that's perhaps unsurprising.
We're going to leave the show there. That's it. That's it. A mic drop from JP Wright. Thanks very much for that. Liverpool were better all over the pitch. They dominated for 20 minutes and Spurs were on top for the rest of the game, says Bobby Dwyer. Klopp lost his shine, says Michael. Awful energy off him for the last 2 years. There you go. We'll leave that there. Tielemans was absolutely abysmal last night, says Neil McEnany. Just wanted to do that one because maybe he's just on the beach and he's like, he knows that he's getting a move to another Premier League team, because Tielemans was one of the highest rated players outside the top 4 clubs, top 6 clubs over the last couple of seasons, and is currently not. So maybe he's feeling, maybe he needs to put in a few performances the last few weeks just to remind everybody, or maybe the deal is already done and his bank account is grand. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. And tomorrow's show, a reaction to the weekend's Gaelic football. Tommy Rooney's on holidays at the moment, so that's why we don't have a performance rankings for you, but Anthony Moyes will be in. Power rankings rather. Keith Wood on the rugby. Former Waterford hurling manager Derek McGrath joins us. Basketball Ireland CEO John Feehan. Tim Stillman on Arsenal Chelsea from tonight. More on the Wolfsburg defeat and plenty more besides. Right now, the best of the Sunday papers. Have a terrific Tuesday.
Mark O'Shea joins Pat Spillane, by the way. The headline of his piece in the Mail on Sunday, just to briefly touch on it, it's baffling how people pay hard cash to watch this farce.
Oh yeah.
So he's just, I think, like us all, looking on in bemusement at so many of the provincial matches. Dublin squashing Laois last weekend by 23 points, and he said, I was thankful I was in my car driving to Cavan when Kerry were beating Tipperary by 20 points. And he says, can you imagine if our overpaid friends across the water showcased their main competition by pitting Manchester City against Oldham and Liverpool against Tranmere? And yet that's what we're doing with our football championship year in, year out. And it's not a new argument, but it's worth mentioning this time of year as ever.
Yeah, but it's also, the argument doesn't bear scrutiny, because the reason why Oldham won't play Man United and Liverpool won't play Stevenage is because they've created the haves and the have-nots. And Gaelic sports, for all the ills that one can put on Gaelic sports, is there's a kind of a democracy at play here. Is that like, look, this is you're in the province, so you're going to play each other, and that's just the way it goes.
It's starting to feel more like a grim communism of some kind. I don't know.
Yeah.
This isn't a GAA interview, and we don't have time to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but it's worth mentioning just in the context of GAA as a segue away from the gas. So Carl Dennehy here, who's done some great interviews lately in the Sunday Independent, pages 18 and 19, he speaks to John Coughlin. Now, John Coughlin's an athletics coach, and he is currently coaching over in Orlando, and he coaches 3 athletes, and all 3 are Olympic or world champions. So he's risen to the top of his sport in athletics coaching, but he just seems like a fella who'll give fairly unvarnished opinions on everything. And he has experience of working in the world of GAA. Andy McEntee brought him in for 3 years when he was Meath coach, so he has a good sense of both the athletics scene here and the GAA scene here. So, for instance, of athletics generally, this is his informed opinion. I'd be pretty worried. We've become so involved, it's like a bubble. We don't realise the bigger picture and how more and more irrelevant athletics is becoming. Of the system of talent development in Ireland in athletics, there is no system from what I can see. It's a system in name only. And then he says, what about doping these days? Better or worse than 20 years ago? He says, it's hard to know. 20 years ago, you had the Balco scandal. Just because there hasn't been a Balco scandal in 23, does that mean the sport is clean, or does it mean people are doing stuff they're able to hide from testing? It's a rhetorical question, I think. And then strength and conditioning in GAA. I thought this was super interesting on GAA generally. So he says, of strength and conditioning in GAA, most are getting it wrong. The GAA template seems to be to train 3 times a week on the pitch, 2 times in the gym. So you're going to spend 40% of the time in the gym to make them all better football players. It's completely disproportionate to the demands of the sport. And he did, by the way, as he was making his way in his career, he did work with the Dublin Hurlers and St. Pat's as well before moving abroad from Irish athletics in 2014. He didn't find the athletics scene here good. Later on, he does say of the athletics scene here, it needs somebody at the top who understands the situation and has got the will to do things. You'll get the odd successful athlete like Derval O'Rourke or Rob Heffernan or Gillick, but they all did it off their own bat. It wasn't anything systematic. You can't rely on the exception. And he says there's plenty of money there. Look at everybody employed in sports public sector. What value are they adding? Where's the money being spent? It's embarrassing. We'll do another report after the Olympics. An absolute waste of money, an exercise of people covering their ass in high up positions. It's the illusion of doing work rather than doing anything of significance and getting results. So it's a completely damning take on Irish athletics. Final point on GAA training. So like I said, he was with Meath for 3 years, and he hates the term S&C. He says it should be conditioning and strength, C&S. He says there aren't enough GAA players conditioned. There's an overemphasis on strength. So what does he define as conditioning, he's asked? Biomotor abilities, speed, strength, power, endurance, mobility, flexibility, agility, coordination. You've got to cover all of those. I think most players aren't fast and fit enough in GAA. The strength part is relatively easy, getting a guy to put on muscle mass. The other part is harder and it's less measurable. There is a vanity element to it. Guys think, I look muscly, therefore I'm conditioned. But you get them doing a running test and it's not so good. Most GAA players haven't done proper training to begin with, so you could probably knock a second off their 100-metre time in the space of a season, which is an amazing thought, through the right training. That's the equivalent of being 3 or 4 yards faster over 30 metres on a pitch. You combine that with boosting their aerobic power and it would be a dramatic effect. He says, you got guys 29 years of age lifting weights for 10 years. What difference will a few more weights make?
That's very interesting.
Boom. Yeah. That's what Joe Brawley's asking for. Some unvarnished, informed opinion. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
super chat.
It's really good. But like, I'd be a very, very casual GAA watcher, but you can't help but look at the Limerick team and think that, wow, their strength and conditioning is off the charts in terms of the physical profile of these guys. It's something that Shane McGrath has touched on as well in terms of hurling, treating concussion more seriously because like guys are getting bigger, they're getting stronger, they're getting faster. This conversation we've been having about rugby for God knows how long, but if Limerick are the market leaders, which quite clearly they are despite yesterday's defeat, then are other teams not going to look at them and see that this is the way to go forward? So I take his points that he's saying, but I would assume Limerick are kind of not part of that conversation because they seem to have really changed, I think, what are demanded of GAA players. I'm only a casual observer, so is that fair to say, do you think?
Well, when he lists off what he defines as conditioning, biomotor abilities, I don't entirely know what that means, but anyway.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Strength, speed, power, endurance, mobility, flexibility, agility, coordination. I'm literally seeing a Limerick hurler there.
Yeah.
So, I would think there are exceptions. He says most are getting it wrong in GAA, but some clearly aren't.
And it's interesting that guys are moving from, in terms of S&C coaches, or CNS as he prefers to call it, from rugby to hurling as well. You had Mikey Kiley, who was with the Limerick Hurlers a few years ago, and he went to Ulster a couple of years ago. So it just shows you that the crossover is happening now, and that feeds into probably Shane McGrath's point that he's making in terms of hurling treating concussion more seriously. So it's fascinating. I find that the crossover between sports like that and the sharing of different ideas really, really interesting, I have to say.
Yeah. We should touch on Paul Kimmage's piece, I think. Just this is an ongoing theme. He's been very much watching Irish horse racing in particular closely of late, and he just highlights another case which he feels isn't satisfactory. It's on pages 14 and 15 of the Sunday Independent. Punishment fails to match the crime. He starts off by talking about Punchestown this week, and there's lots of backslapping and everyone's great, and he's not so sure it's a pretty situation behind the scenes. And he mentions William Jones, who has written a book, The Black Horse Inside Coolmore, and also The Black Horse is Dying, which is very much about doping. And he got an email from him during the week to highlight a case which he teases out here. So in short, we go back 16 months and Elmarie Holden from Ballyhale is making headlines because she's doing a great job. Moderate success in 6 years as a trainer, but her true gift is an eye for great horses. So it mentions a couple of her successes. And then February 8th, 2022, the testers arrive in her yard. A month later, Holden was informed that hair samples from 3 horses had revealed the presence of clenbuterol, which is prohibited at all times unless prescribed by veterinary surgeons. So this is last year. A year on, March 1st, the IHRB published their 565-word report on the case. There's a €3,000 fine, and in effect, we are told that the medication was administered in accordance with a vet's directions, and that the copies of prescriptions were provided retrospectively by Holden's vet, Dr. Mazzarello. So Mazzarello confirmed that clenbuterol was administered to treat coughing and nasal discharge in the horses for 3 months between September and November 21, and that period of exposure is consistent with the reports from the labs. Paul Kimmage says, what were the findings of the lab? Were no blood samples taken? What were the levels? What do the prescriptions say exactly? Was there any record of the frequency or the dosage? It must have been a nasty infection that 3 horses suffered for 3 months at exactly the same time. It was all very vague, is his sense. And interestingly, he notes as well, on the same day of the Holden inquiry, the IHRB published a biannual anti-doping report for the 6 months to December, and it included an unusual reference to clenbuterol. And so the warning was, it's a drug that may be misused if it's given to horses without respiratory disease, and it can lead to muscle building. If clenbuterol is detected, says this report, it will be followed up, and evidence such as prescriptions and associated records will be sought to confirm that it's been used only for valid therapeutic reasons. We remind trainers of their obligations to use clenbuterol responsibly with proper veterinary involvement and oversight, and to document its use correctly. And Paul Kimmage says, or what? We'll fine you $3,000. And he reached out to the various participants for comment and didn't receive any comment. So from the point of view, I should stress, of Elmarie Holden, she was investigated. The IHRB accepted that this was given by her vet and it was required, and they have very much accepted that position. Paul Kimmage is pointing out there is some vagueness here on what transpired, and also he's wondering if $3,000 is an appropriate punishment nonetheless. So in general terms, it's just another part of this portfolio in the Sunday Independent over the last couple of years, whereby questions are being asked about specific cases, answers aren't forthcoming, and it is in amongst what is a very joyous week at Punchestown for the sport away from all that. Have you been following this?
Half a bit. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know enough about horse. I know, it's like, I know that clenbuterol is administered for horses with colds and whatever, but
I think you would just at this stage love to see an interview.
Yeah, or
Hillier and Paul Kimmage. Just to be a good
and I think that would be
to have.
Actually would be a very interesting conversation to have. There's an inference here of an industry that kind of inward looking and protects its own quite well, and all the rest. Interestingly enough, just because it's kind of a really important story, but it's also, to a lot of people, it just feels so dull. But like the Mail have 2 pages on, does the Premier League have a drugs problem? And again, and just like there's a lot in here. It's a big investigation. But the top line is, Premier League footballers are almost never tested for the banned performance-enhancing drug testosterone. Top flight stars can expect to be subject to even the most basic drug test as infrequently as once per season. Ooh. And that's their that's their opening dart, and then it goes in and there's a lot of data, but interestingly enough, more to the point, and it kind of echoes Paul Kimmage's frustrations, I guess. Is that the Mail have put in they wanted some Freedom of Information Acts, and they were 5 of them refused. On blood doping and testosterone in the Premier League tests, on blood in all footballers in England, anyway, so on and so forth. They were all refused, and the most popular reason given was disclosure would allow dopers to avoid getting caught, which seems counterintuitive, but look, the inference here is that compared to athletics, compared to swimming, is that footballers are tested very, very sporadically.
Oh, football is getting away with a lot, I think.
Yeah,
it's fair to say on this front, and the lack of scrutiny. So it's welcome to see that piece.
Yeah. So and so they kind of they're sister pieces. The Paul Kimmage's in the Sunday Independent, and then this Edmund Willison big piece in the Mail on Sunday.
I would be absolutely sure that 2-page investigation, the headline of 1 test per year potentially for lots of footballers, the non-testing of testosterone, will make exactly no impact on the news cycle.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's and like the doping kind of aspect is actually pretty. It's shared across lots of the papers because they're talking about Man City obviously feature a lot in a different kind of doping in terms of financial doping, which is a big theme as well. So I thought it was interesting to see the different kind of takes on it. You know, Eamon Sweeney's writing about it, Jonathan Wilson is writing in the Observer and the Sunday Independent about it, and basically saying that I think what a lot of people think, that, you know, City's success is slightly tainted and it has to have an asterisk next to it, whereas in the, was it Neil Moxley I think I picked out in the Sunday People, I think, takes the total opposite, that we should all be jumping up and down hailing these guys, and barely even mentions where their money has kind of come from, you know, which is not the right way to go about it either, I don't think so.
Yeah. I thought Jonathan Wilson's piece, because we chatted to Jonathan about this during the week, and he pretty much teased out our conversation on page 11 of the Sunday Independent, and it's in the Observer as well. Are City getting too good to be loved? Premier League in danger of becoming a one-team show. So, I mean, the point of the piece is a thought I suspect any football fans listening have had. He says, and he starts by saying, Manchester City are brilliant. They can win games with the ball, without the ball. They can eviscerate opponents. They have Erling Haaland, who is possessive of attributes that maybe only half a dozen footballers in history have had. He says, though, they are also a symptom of the financial structures that are destroying what the game of football was once understood to be. The naive and willfully blind will say there have been other dominant teams, but not like this, there haven't. And he does say they're about to win 5 and 6. Liverpool did that between 79 and 84. United did it between 96 and 01. But again, this is very different. He says later on, City have spent wisely. They are that rarest of things in football. They are rich and clever. Todd Bowley somewhere looked up at the sky and thought, my ears burning. But he likens, you know, I suppose the parallels with Manchester United 99 are being drawn. He says if United, there was a sense they could slip up at any time. And they did only win the league with 79 points, United. It was a different time, I appreciate. But still, late comebacks became the defining theme. Mentions FA Cup games such as the win over Liverpool, where York and Solskjaer scored in the 88th and 90th minutes. There was the classic against Arsenal, Giggs running the pitch, Keane's red card, Bergkamp penalty. They remain classics. He asks, though, does anybody, even now, remember without an effort that City beat Chelsea and Arsenal in the 3rd and 4th rounds of the FA Cup? To which most of us said, no, I don't remember that. He goes on to say, United's, here's a stat, I suppose, their dominance. United's last 15 games in the Premier League, they only had 3 wins where they won by more than a single goal. Whereas City, and they still have 7 of their final 15 games to go, they've already won 6 by more than a single goal, including against Arsenal, where they're completely dominant. And he concludes by touching on the breaches in competition. And he says, the Premier League's USP among Europe's big 5 leagues used to be competitiveness, but below City, to an extent, it still is competitive, but it's in danger of tipping into Ligue 1 or Bundesliga territory. He says perhaps Newcastle, another state-backed side, will become notable rivals, which presents problems all of its own. So the City dominance, it does feel very different to anything we've ever seen before in the Premier League.
The word dominance, though, like I find it's interesting, like they haven't dominated the Champions League and they haven't won the Champions League, and like there's a similar conversation going around Leinster at the moment for very different reasons, that Leinster are this all dominating, you know, force. They haven't won the Champions Cup since 2018. So like, is this not just a period that City are, you know, going through a dominance? Well, Liverpool of course won the league as well. It's not like City have been, you know, totally destroying everyone else. And if Pep Guardiola was to leave, does that not kind of change things as well? Like it's a perfect storm of having the state-backed money, unbelievable players, unbelievable manager, which is the point Jonathan Wilson has made. But like, what happens when Pep, you know, kind of gets tired of this? Like, and if they win the Champions League, you know, you'd imagine there's a chance that he could go, well, that's me done here. And does then, of course, the whole thing won't fall apart, but are they going to be as dominant? I would have my doubts, I have to say.
I would as well, and I think increasingly the Premier League will be on the toes of City when it comes to their financial dealings going forward. And there's just too much wealth elsewhere in the Premier League for some clubs somewhere not to get it right reasonably often, like Liverpool have done in recent seasons. So, and I would share your point, when Guardiola goes, he is a bit of a freak.
Yeah.
Do you love City?
Do I love? No. There's something like Guardiola's genius is about removing unpredictability from football to the best of his ability. And it's brilliant. And if, as a football fan, you observe and you watch that kind of little triangle passing that they do, and you go, that's unbelievably good. Like, I could watch Bernardo Silva all day long, but ultimately it's kind of dull as well. I like the harem scarum. A little bit of harem scarum is good for me. I think it adds to excitement. To the broader point, look, this argument here, the City, it's all over. It's kind of reminiscent of, take us back 2 years when the Dubs were winning 5 in a row, and it was like, they're going to win the next 15 All-Irelands. And because it is, as Cian, and you're absolutely right, it is a perfect storm. You need the money, you need the investment, but you also need the tactical nous. And Guardiola is one of the 5 greatest managers ever to have managed in football. I think when his day is done, they'll talk about him the way they talk about Cruyff or Herbert Chapman before him. And the issue, though, is that even, and there's a key point, is that like when Liverpool were dominant from 73 to 89, Liverpool were the dominant side, they would still lose 5 games, 6 games, 8 games a season. Nowadays, you're winning the league, losing 2 games. Well, this year is kind of a weird year.
I think you've hit on the key distinction.
Yeah.
In this era, Man City, that is, and Liverpool for a time, have just made it commonplace to hit 91, 95 points. And so most weekends, it's like, okay, who are they going to whoop this week?
Who are you going to hammer this year?
And Leinster have done the same.
Yeah.
And then City will fall in a knockout game in Europe, akin to Leinster. But that doesn't make a lot of Leinster or City's dominance in their respective leagues a touch dull.
Absolutely, and that's the point I was trying to make. But I would imagine City are very similar to Leinster in that it's a little bit different now because the South African teams have changed the URC and it's clearly much more difficult to win. But Leinster judge their success off the Champions Cup. Like, that is, if they win the URC for this year, for example, if they win the URC but lose the Champions Cup final, that would be a failure. And I would imagine City now are in a similar boat where all their eggs are in the Champions League basket. And again, like, is there not a good chance that Real Madrid could knock them out here?
There is a decent chance.
And I feel like that's kind of being overlooked a little bit. And then if City lose in the Champions League semi-final, I would be careful to use the word dominance when they're not sweeping across the board. I think they're still waiting to win the Champions League.
But if you were a betting man, you'd have to put City as prohibitive favourites against Real Madrid.
The same happens with Leinster every year.
Yeah.
They're going to win the European Cup this year.
They hammer everyone before them when it comes to the crunch, and then they're like, whoa, we haven't actually played a team this good.
I mean, obviously, Real Madrid, and it's a conversation for an entirely different time, but like, Real Madrid are a weird anomaly of a club. They're such a weird, they don't dominate the Spanish league.
I guess the point is, in the face of a club like City, there'll always be some weird club, be it Saracens one year and La Rochelle the next. There'll always be someone who will rise up and maybe disappears quickly, and City, akin to Leinster, will always be thereabouts, but they may not dominate.
And the Dubs example is a brilliant example of that as well. Like, the conversation has totally changed now around that as well. Sport works in cycles.
Yeah. I mean,
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
OTB